What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 8 Chapter 246 Tacit Cooperation Advertisement. After seeing Tony rush out, Uchiha Madara stopped his pace. After all, Tony should be very angry with Obadiah and wanted to solve this man himself, so Uchiha Madara went directly to Coulson and Miss Potts. After seeing Uchiha Madara appear, Miss Potts breathed a sigh of relief, and then Coulson felt a little embarrassed while he was relieved. After all, Uchiha Madara had knocked Obadiah unconscious before and delivered it to Coulson himself. But I didn't expect that Coulson, with several other agents, could not see the talent and cause Obadiah to escape. Fortunately, Uchiha Madara arrived in time, otherwise everyone would be screwed. Sorry, Mr. Uchiha Madara, is my fault. Coulson walked to Uchiha Madara's side and said in a good manner. Although he felt a little helpless, but Coulson was not his subordinate after all, Uchiha Madara didn't say much, just shook his head slightly. It's not all your fault, after all, although Obadiah's equipment is pirated, it is much better than ordinary people. Uchiha Madara replied indifferently. After answering Coulson's words, Uchiha Madara turned his gaze to Miss Potts, who was still in shock and looked a little embarrassed. Pepper, are you okay? If I knew about this, I wouldn't let you take action, Uchiha Madara said with concern. After hearing Uchiha Madara's slightly apologetic words, Pepper reluctantly sorted out his emotions and pulled a smile towards Uchiha Madara. It has nothing to do with you, I am willing to do it myself, and this also allows me to see the true colors of some people. Pepper replied in a hoarse voice. After a few chats with Uchiha Madara, Miss Potts finally came to her senses, and then she had some concerns about Tony's safety. You don't need to stay here all the time, Tony doesn't know what's going on, maybe he needs you more, Miss Potts said with a worried face. Don't worry, Tony can handle it himself, we have to trust him, Uchiha Madara said very confidently. Although it is true, Uchiha Madara is also ready, as soon as Tony asks for help, he is ready to rush over. Advertisement. Seeing that Uchiha Madara stopped talking, the others gradually became silent and began to wait patiently for the news from Tony. After waiting for 10 minutes, Tony's tired and happy voice suddenly sounded in Uchiha Madara's Bluetooth headset. Everything is settled, I am the omnipotent Stark. Tony's voice was as arrogant as ever, but Uchiha Madara couldn't help but smile knowingly. Just when Chia-san was about to congratulate Tony, he suddenly heard a very huge movement over there, and then Tony's voice suddenly changed. What's the matter, Tony? What's going on? Hearing Tony's voice that was not quite right, Uchiha Madara's tone couldn't help but bring urgency. However, Uchiha Madara didn't hear Tony's answer at all, and could only hear a few painful howls from Tony. Hearing this voice, where could Uchiha Madara sit still? He was about to set off to find Tony. In any case, Tony is also a person on his side, not a fake like Obadiah who can bully. Just as Uchiha Madara was about to leave, Tony's voice came intermittently, and after a while it gradually became coherent. You don't have to come, I can handle it, but I need you to do me a little favor, Tony said in a relaxed tone as much as possible. No matter how he usually behaves, Tony is actually a very reliable person. Since Tony has already said so, Uchiha Madara has no intention of going over. Okay, if there is anything you need me to do, just say it. Uchiha Madara agreed very readily. It's very simple, we just overload the generator and blow the roof off, Tony briefly explained to Uchiha Madara. Now that Tony had a solution in his heart, Uchiha Madara stopped talking, just listened to Tony quietly. Go to the main console now and open all the circuit gate valves. I will notify you as soon as I leave the roof. Press the control button of the sub-circuit. Don't worry, leave it to me, Uchiha Madara replied calmly. Advertisement. Then, while others had some doubtful eyes, Uchiha Madara walked directly to the almost destroyed company building. After seeing Uchiha Madara's ability, other people naturally would not raise any objection to Uchiha Madara's behavior, but just watched silently behind him. Soon Uchiha Madara walked to the main console and easily opened all the circuit valves. My side is ready, you can act at any time, Uchiha Madara said to Tony in a very confident tone. This is also due to the knowledge accumulated during this period of research on steel suits, otherwise Uchiha Madara would not be able to fully recognize the things on the console. But now looking at the buttons on the console, Uchiha Madara is completely at ease and can easily solve this problem. After Uchiha Madara finished saying those words, there was no waiting for Tony's response, and then suddenly there was a crackling sound from the top of the building. Uchiha Madara looked up and found that the glass on the top floor had all been shattered and was now falling. Then Uchiha Madara saw that half of Tony's body was about to fall, but he quickly grabbed the steel frame above and hung in midair. There was also a sound of things breaking from above, and Tony quickly lowered his head, "Lead to how?" and shouted at Uchiha Madara, "It's now." The current situation is indeed a bit complicated. Tony can't leave the balcony at all, because once he leaves the top floor, Obadiah will surely follow. Once that button is pressed, not only Obadiah, but probably Tony will also have an accident. But after thinking for a few seconds, Uchiha Madara immediately made a decision, put his hand on the button in front of him, and pressed it gently. The moment the button was pressed, Uchiha Madara rushed up, grabbed Tony's leg, and pulled Tony down. Because it all happened between lightning and flint, Uchiha Madara also did not control his strength. After landing on the ground, he accidentally threw Tony out. But being dumped once on the ground seems to be a lot more than staying on the top floor and waiting to die. Chapter 247 Iron Man Advertisement Chapter 247 Iron Man. After Uchiha Madara pulled Tony down, the entire top floor was directly wrapped in a dazzling light, and lightning could be seen from the inside. But Uchiha Madara didn't have the heart to watch the fun inside, so he picked up the scarred Tony and ran out. When Uchiha Madara and Tony just ran to the open space outside, Obadiah inside seemed to have fallen from the top floor and just fell into the laboratory. As a result, there was a very large explosion in the laboratory, and almost the entire group was destroyed. Although it is a pity that the entire company building was completely destroyed, it is fortunate that there were no casualties, which is also a fortune in misfortune. As for Obadiah, after experiencing such a big explosion, it is estimated that there are no bones left, so there is no need to care about this person. Uchiha Madara first picked up Tony, who was in a coma, then called Miss Potts and returned to the villa in Malibu together. Then Uchiha Madara contacted Colonel Roddy again. After all, Colonel Roddy was the press spokesman for this area. It is impossible for such a big movement to go unnoticed in the urban area. Instead of passively addressing the impact of this matter, it is better to preemptively eliminate other people's curiosity as soon as possible. Although there are not many opportunities to meet Colonel Roddy, after a brief chat, 513 Uchiha Madara had to admit that Tony was lucky. At least Colonel Roddy is a very sincere friend, and there is no need for Uchiha Madara to raise his head at all, and Colonel Roddy directly took this matter over. Don't worry, it's just because of the consequences of a little malfunction of the robot. No one will be curious about these things, Roddy said with a smile. Unexpectedly, even though Roddy was so eloquent, Uchiha Madara also showed a tacit smile to Roddy. Although it was very easy to say, but the follow-up things still have to be resolved, so Roddy and Uchiha Madara said a few words and then said goodbye in a hurry. After Roddy left, Uchiha Madara returned to the room and glanced at the unconscious Tonys. Tony was really embarrassed when he was brought back by Uchiha Madara. Advertisement not only was there scars all over his body, but his entire face was so smoked that he could not see his original appearance, and now the wounds have obviously been treated by the doctor. Tony kept frowning even when he was in a coma, apparently not sleeping well. So Uchiha Madara gestured towards the doctor, and then, AFBB, silently took the doctor out of the room. Well, Tony should be fine, right? Uchiha Madara glanced, the family doctor asked. Don't worry, Stark is just some skin trauma, and it will heal in a few days. The doctor replied with a smile at Uchiha Madara. After reaching a satisfactory answer, Uchiha Madara finally breathed a sigh of relief, and then let the others rest. There is nothing serious on Tony's side, and there is no need for others to guard. The next day, Uchiha Madara was enjoying breakfast at the dining table when he saw Tony swinging out of his room. Looks like you're recovering well. Uchiha Madara glanced at Tony and said with a smile. Of course, he's just a pirate. How can he compare to me? I'm fine, Tony said very stubbornly. Knowing that Tony had some useless desire to win, Uchiha Madara didn't refute, but just put his eyes on the TV screen. The TV was just playing the scene of Colonel Roddy's press conference. After watching the press conference, Tony had a smile on his face. Roddy did a good job this time. Mingming was very satisfied, but Tony had to say it in a very tsundere tone. Knowing Tony's character, Uchiha Madara didn't say anything to refute, just looked at Tony with a half smile. Probably a little embarrassed by Uchiha Madara's eyes, Tony opened the newspaper in front of him with a little embarrassment, and covered his face with the newspaper to cover up the embarrassment. Fortunately, the newspaper just reported on what happened last night. Last night's Tony not only dealt with Obadiah, but also went to do justice. Obadiah is just like crazy. Yesterday, he rushed directly to the main road, causing traffic jams and many car accidents. Advertisement, and he wanted to lift up some vehicles and throw them into the air. Tony, who was wearing a steel suit, stood up and helped the vehicles that were thrown out. It is precisely because Tony is wearing a steel suit that others don't know Tony's true identity, so they can only give Tony a nickname called Iron Man. Seeing the prominent characters of Iron Man on the front cover of the newspaper, Uchiha Madara whistled at Tony, all joking. I have to say that Tony's face is as thick as a city wall. Facing the smile of Uchiha Madara, there is no embarrassment at all. Wow, if they still have some vision, Iron Man sounds good, Tony said triumphantly. In the face of such a confused Tony, Uchiha Madara immediately poured a basin of cold water. People praised Iron Man, not you Tony Stark, Uchiha Madara said sharply. Hearing this, Tony immediately stopped in place, but he knew that what Uchiha Madara said was completely true, and in the end Tony could only snort coldly. So what? No matter what they think, Iron Man and Tony Tank are one person, Tony said with a tsundere face. Uchiha Madara didn't want to argue with Tony, just nodded very perfunctorily, and then concentrated on the food in front of him. Actually, I also want to testify against one of their mistakes. This battlesuit is not made of steel, but is made of gold and titanium alloys. Tony was silent for a moment and couldn't help but speak. Uchiha Madara rolled his eyes at Tony's remarks, ignoring this guy who got cheap and sold well. No one paid attention to him, so Tony couldn't sing his one-man show, and he settled down quickly and sat in front of the dining table. At this moment, Coulson followed behind Miss Potts with a document and walked in. I hope I didn't bother you, Coulson smiled at everyone, showing a slightly apologetic expression. This is the speech, and the proof that Tony was on the island all night is all ready, and there are dozens of testimonies, Coulson said very seriously. After taking the document, Tony opened it and took a serious look, then a smile appeared on his face. It seems that your various departments still have some power, and you can actually get these things, Tony said meaningfully. Chapter 248 Press Conference Advertisement Chapter 248 Press Conference. For Tony's yin and yang strange words, Coulson just smiled and ignored Tony at all. It is estimated that you have also figured out Tony's temper. The more you explain to him, the more energetic Tony will be. Anyway, as long as it's useful, prepare yourself, Tony said to Tony in a flat tone, then smiled at Uchiha Madara and prepared to leave. I'll trouble you this time, I owe you a favor. Uchiha Madara also smiled back at Coulson and said in a calm tone. You know, this is a great favor, and it means that the Uchiha Madara gang allows Coulson to ask himself for help when he encounters a problem. But Coulson still didn't understand what the words Uchiha Madara meant, just nodded to Uchiha Madara with a smile, and then prepared to leave. After Coulson said goodbye, Miss Potts glanced helplessly at Tony who was looking at the documents, and then took the initiative to bid Coulson farewell. Okay, it turns out that we should leave now. Uchiha Madara reached out and patted Tony, who was pretending to read the documents, and said helplessly. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Tony finally got up from his chair, put on his suit and prepared to go to a press conference with Uchiha Madara. After the press conference, Roddy's speech was almost at the last moment. After seeing Tony, he immediately brought the topic to Tony. But because he was afraid that Tony would say something shocking when the time came, Roddy took a precaution in advance, saying that Tony would not answer any questions. Although Roddy said so, the reporters below saw Tony like a shark that smelled blood. It's not just these two words that can dispel enthusiasm, and Uchiha Madara still understands Tony, and always feels that Tony will do something earth-shattering today. But anyway, this matter has nothing to do with Uchiha Madara, it should be other people who should be troubled. So Uchiha Madara chose a seat very easily and sat down, looking calmly at what might happen next. Advertisement. Soon Tony walked to the podium, but as expected by Uchiha Madara, Tony made a big move at the beginning. Tony took out Coulson's prepared speech directly, and under everyone's attention, he was ready to start scripting. Although the fact that there was a speech was tacitly understood by everyone, these reporters probably did not expect that Tony would take out the speech so carelessly. The reporters couldn't help laughing. Because of Tony's move, the atmosphere at the press conference was much more relaxed. Everything at the beginning went on very normally, but just as Tony was speaking, a female reporter below suddenly interrupted Tony. Interrupt Mr. Stark, you don't really think we will believe this statement, do you? The one who fell from the sky is the bodyguard? The reporter asked sharply. After seeing the reporter's face, Uchiha Madara remembered that it was the reporter who brought back the photo of the town and handed it to Uchiha Madara and Tony at the banquet. Although I don't know what the reason is, the reporter seems to be very targeted towards Tony. Tony, who was interrupted to speak, was also unhappy and did not want to answer such a knowing question. Of course you have the right to be skeptical about the official explanation, but I don't understand what you want to express, Tony replied with a cold face. Could it be that you want to put that superhero S on my head and say I'm going to save people? In the face of Tony's rebuttal, the reporter was unusually calm and said calmly, I didn't say what kind of superhero S you are. In the face of such an answer, Tony nodded calmly, but familiar people can see Tony's hidden panic from the calm expression on Tony's face. As expected by Uchiha Madara, after being interrupted by this reporter, Tony's next speech seemed incoherent. Of course I'm not a superhero, S. I mean my character can't do what a hero, S, would do, Tony said, pretending to be calm. Probably because Tony's words had nothing to do with the content of today's press conference, so Roddy got into Tony's ear. Although I couldn't hear what Roddy said, but with a little brainstorming, I knew that it must be for Tony to quickly return to the topic. Advertisement 0. For flowers. It can be seen that Tony nodded slightly, and then quickly picked up the speech in his hand, and continued to read according to the speech. But just after reading a few words, Tony suddenly stopped his actions and looked around blankly. The female reporter who was the first to attack Tony before sat on her chair with a cold expression, watching with sarcasm. Probably stimulated by such an expression, the expression on Tony's face suddenly became not quite right. After seeing that Tony's face was different, Uchiha Madara knew that today's press conference could not go on as everyone expected. But this is not a big deal for Uchiha Madara. The most important thing in life is to live happily. So even if Uchiha Madara had expected it, Tony might say something unexpected, but he didn't go up and stop it. Sure enough, Tony put the speech directly on the table and watched everyone under the stage seriously. About the fact that happened yesterday. I'm Iron Man. Tony's initially confused eyes soon firmed up, and he said in a positive tone. Hearing this confession of identity, Uchiha Madara was not surprised at all. Showing an expression like this is the Tony I know. After sensing Uchiha Madara's gaze, Tony smiled in the direction of Uchiha Madara. Probably after he finished talking about his identity, Tony felt more relaxed than ever. The others couldn't be as calm as Uchiha Madara did, all with surprised expressions on their faces. Especially these reporters, it was as if a drop was dropped directly into the boiling oil pan, causing a great uproar. When Tony directly followed the script, these reporters were actually very disappointed, and they had already prepared for the possibility of returning without success today. But I didn't expect Tony to release such a big news directly. These reporters just stood up and rushed forward like crazy. Chapter 249 Advertisement Chapter 249 The reporters who were sitting with indifferent faces were like sharks who had smelled blood, and they all wanted to rush forward to get more information from Tony's mouth. However, Tony didn't want to answer the next words, just let his bodyguard come forward and stop the others slightly coldly. After making a big announcement, Tony left directly from the press conference. Uchiha Madara was originally here to join in the fun. After hearing what Tony said, he knew that the next scene was absolutely chaotic. So Uchiha Madara also left early and returned to the lounge. Not long after Uchiha Madara sat down, she saw Tony walking in. Miss Potts said something excitedly behind Tony. Listen to Pepper, I'm very awake now. I'm just explaining a fact to everyone on May 17th. Tony said to Miss Potts with a helpless expression. Having worked by Tony's side for so many years, Miss Potts has long been accustomed to Tony's waywardness. But this time this announcement really caught Miss Potts off guard, which is why she was so excited. I know, but have you ever thought about the consequences, Tony? You can't be so willful, Miss Potts said in a tired tone. After hearing this evaluation, Tony was obviously very excited and wanted to refute Miss Potts. Uchiha Madara didn't want to hear that there were some unnecessary quarrels, and hurriedly stopped the two of them. Okay, it's useless for you to say anything now, it was a live broadcast, and now everyone knows it, Uchiha Madara said sharply. Tony and Miss Potts obviously knew about it, but they couldn't control their emotions for a while. Now that Uchiha Madara pointed it out so bluntly, the two of them barely controlled themselves, and then shook hands and made peace. Advertisement. It was barely a reconciliation, but although Miss Potts obviously didn't want to see Tony who made her troubled, she left the lounge and was ready to go outside to deal with this matter. After Miss Potts left, the hippie smile on Tony's face disappeared immediately, and there were some heavy sighs. The new superhero, S. What do you have to sigh? Many people want to interview you and praise you. Uchiha Madara glanced at Tony and said yin and yang strangely. Although she was very firm in front of Miss Potts before, she did not hide her feelings when facing Uchiha Madara. I'm just excited for a while, and there should be endless quarrels next, Tony said with a slight sigh. This is bound to happen. When it was just Tony Stark before, there were already a lot of eyes on Tony. Not to mention that now Tony has become a superhero, there will definitely be countless people arguing about Tony's appearance. And the most important thing is that the lethality of the steel battlesuit is too strong, and the relevant departments do not estimate that they will not just watch. The steel battlesuit is completely monopolized by Tony. You first think about how to monopolize the technology of Steel War 1 in your own hands. If it leaks out, it will be a complete disaster, Uchiha Madara said meaningfully. Although what Uchiha Madara said is relatively obscure, but Tony has always lived in such an environment, how could he not understand what Uchiha Madara meant? Therefore, Tony rubbed his forehead with some distress. There is indeed some trouble in this matter. After all, these people are not as easy to pass as reporters. Although he was very irritable inside, on the surface, Tony was very tough, and he was not willing to give in at all. I'm not going to hand over the technology of the battle, it's just ridiculous. This is something I developed. Tony is very sure. Although the words are said, no one knows what will happen by then, and Uchiha Madara's assertiveness to Tony is nothing but a laugh. With no one arguing with himself, Tony quickly fell silent. Just when Uchiha Madara and Tony were sitting in the lounge, talking to each other, there was a sudden sound of hurried footsteps outside. Then the door of the lounge was pushed open with great force, and Rody appeared in front of Uchiha Madara and Tony with a look of anger. Advertisement, Tony, what are you doing? Can't you just read it according to the script? Roddy was obviously mad, and his voice suddenly became very excited. Faced with Roddy's questioning, Tony replied calmly, I didn't do anything wrong, I just told the facts. 35. However, although Roddy can't listen to these words now, there are some anxiously walking around the room, spinning in circles, just like ants on a hot pot. What's going on outside? Are those reporters sent away? Uchiha Madara glared at Tony before asking Roddy. When facing Uchiha Madara, Roddy's attitude softened a lot and nodded towards Uchiha Madara. The reporters have already been sent away, but this matter must be hidden. Everyone should have seen it. Roddy sighed and said a little tiredly. Things have already happened, it's useless to be annoyed. Soldiers will block the water and cover up. Uchiha Madara looked very open and said calmly. This is easier said than done, but there really is no other way now. As expected, within a few minutes after the press conference, you can see that Tony is Iron Man on various platforms. The impact of this incident was too great, and soon everyone forgot what happened to the Stark group at that time, and was keen to discuss that Tony actually became Iron Man. There are also many people who swear and promise that a person with a character like Tony can't take on the heavy responsibility of the Iron 1.1 Man at all. Some people say that Tony, a black-hearted capitalist, said that he had closed the weapons manufacturing department before, but now he has produced a steel battlesuit that is more lethal. All in all, the current wind direction of the fishing reel is very unfriendly to Tony. After all, the lethality of the steel battlesuit is obvious to all. It is normal for everyone to be skeptical about such a new type of thing. The situation has become so complicated now that Uchiha Madara doesn't believe it at all to say that no one has contributed to it. Ordinary people only see the destructive power of steel battlesuits, but there are always some people who see the benefits that steel battlesuits can bring to them. So even though they have been staying in the villa for a few days, Uchiha Madara and Tony can receive calls from time to time, discussing the steel suits in secret. Chapter 250 Robbers Advertisement Chapter 250 Robbers. Uchiha Madara was really impatient with these people's repeated inquiries. This matter was originally because of Tony, and Uchiha Madara simply threw all the blame to Tony. Said that he was just a person living in Tony's house, and he didn't know anything about the steel suits. Although Uchiha Madara's statement is too nonsense, those people naturally do not believe it, but because Uchiha Madara's mouth is too strict. And Uchiha Madara is not easy to deal with, so these people can only pretend to chat a few words, and finally put their attention on Tony. After throwing all the pots away, Uchiha Madara was really relieved, but Tony was really annoyed. You're better now, all these people have started to come to me. Tony hung up the phone, glanced at Uchiha Madara who was acting very leisurely on the side, and couldn't help complaining. Facing Tony's slightly sad eyes, Uchiha Madara ignored it and raised the glass in his hand towards Tony with a smile. It's hard work for those who are capable, and this steel battlesuit was originally used by you. What does it have to do with me? Oh 5. Uchiha Madara said in a natural tone. This is a fact, so Tony has no point to refute at all. He can only continue to be patient and send those who came to ask. Although Uchiha Madara has some sad eyes towards Tony, he can basically ignore it. But it is indeed a little uncomfortable to have such a person looking at you with such eyes every day. So Uchiha Madara left Tony in the villa alone and continued to deal with these things, while he walked to the city center very leisurely and wandered around. Although the previous Uchiha Madara had money and power, but his life has been too busy, there is no chance to walk the streets leisurely like this. However, after so many years of development, New York is no longer the New York in the memory of the live broadcast class. Now New York has become very prosperous. There are row upon row of shops on the streets, and the dazzling goods are hard to pick. Advertisement customers like Uchiha Madara who are very wealthy at first glance are very popular at any store. After a crazy shopping experience, Uchiha Madara found a more distinctive shop and sat down, ready to enjoy some delicious food. There are so many people in this restaurant, so Uchiha Madara can only sit and wait for the food after ordering? Before Uchiha Madara's dishes were ready, 3 or 4 burly men rushed in with their faces covered, all with guns in their hands. Raise your hands, you'd better be obedient, the leading man shouted in a very fierce voice. Because this group of people appeared too suddenly, and they all had weapons in their hands, everyone in the store was taken aback. Many people couldn't help screaming loudly. The cry of the child was mixed with the scream of the woman and other curses, which was undoubtedly a disaster for the hearing. I saw that the person in the lead also seemed very impatient with these voices, and couldn't help frowning. You all shut up for me, otherwise. The leader's unfinished words were full of threats. Then I watched the leader fire a shot into the sky, and under the shock of the gunshots, the very noisy environment immediately quieted down. Everyone was very obedient and sat in their seats, not daring to make any sound again. Although everyone else's faces were scowling and fearful of the unknown, Uchiha Madara always felt a little funny watching this scene. This was a situation that Uchiha Madara had never encountered before, so Uchiha Madara sat in his seat and watched this scene with great interest, like watching the picture on TV. At first everyone thought that this group of people wanted to rob, but after everyone was arranged, these people did not want to make the next move. Instead, these people took out their mobile phones, not knowing what the people over there were talking about. While the group of people were talking on the phone, Uchiha Madara sat in his seat very leisurely, as if he was drinking afternoon tea without any panic. A few minutes after the group hung up, sirens blared outside. Advertisement. Even if such a thing happened in New York, the speed of dispatching the police would not be so fast in general, so there is only one possibility: the origin of this group of people must not be simple. After thinking of this, Uchiha Madara became interested, with a look of anticipation on his face. After all, life is too boring. Uchiha Madara is always looking for something to adjust this boring life. The business of this restaurant has been very hot, and now there are a lot of people stuck in the restaurant. Therefore, these police officers did not dare to act rashly even when they came, and could only shout to these people outside with a loudspeaker. In fact, in the end, it's just a few nonsense shouting and shouting. Since everyone dares to come out and do these things, it's not something the police can persuade with these nonsense words. The further back they got, the more impatience they showed. They pointed the gun at the shopkeeper and asked the shopkeeper to take out a loudspeaker, and started to answer the people outside. Stop talking nonsense, just say one sentence whether you agree to our conditions. If you don't agree, I can guarantee the safety of these people. The leader shouted 517 outside. After the leader shouted these words, there was silence outside for a while, probably to discuss this matter carefully. We still need to report this matter to the superior. After all, this matter is relatively important and we can't decide. The policeman shouted towards the inside. Give you the last 15 minutes, I want to hear a result, and let our boss go quickly, otherwise. A big man said while firing a shot at the door. At this point, Uchiha Madara almost understood the situation in front of him. The boss of these burly men should have been caught. Now these people want to rely on the lives of a roomful of people to get their bosses out. Combined with the embarrassing attitude of the police outside, it can be guessed that the crime committed by the boss of this group of people should not be too small. Uchiha Madara really never imagined that one day he would suddenly become a bargaining chip in the hands of the kidnappers. This is simply too new. Originally, Uchiha Madara planned to quickly take action to deal with these people, but now he wants to see the efficiency of the police outside, so he is not in a hurry to do it himself. A few minutes later, another voice came from the door, but the voice Uchiha Madara sounded somewhat familiar. Chapter 251 Advertisement Chapter 251. I'm from S.H.I.E.L.D., and I'll give you one last chance to release everyone inside, otherwise don't blame our men for being merciless. Hearing this voice, Uchiha Madara immediately reacted, and Agent Coulson actually came over in person. After all, Uchiha Madara and Fury are old friends, and they have a general understanding of some situations in S.H.I.E.L.D. After so many years, the authority of S.H.I.E.L.D. should not have changed much. Think of it this way. Uchiha Madara is even more curious about the identity of the boss of these populations. When Uchiha Madara watched the big scene in front of him with great interest, these burly men were very irritable. Didn't you hear my conditions? Hurry up and release our boss, or we'll be rude, the leading masked man said rudely. But it is obvious that the identity of the boss in the mouth of these robbers should not be simple, and the people outside did not let go. These robbers were really impatient without waiting for the answer they wanted. Uchiha saw the robbers walking in his direction. Just when Uchiha Madara was ready to do it, the robbers passed Uchiha Madara directly. The robbers reached out and grabbed a little girl behind Uchiha Madara, pulling her out of his mother's arms. This little girl has always been very sensible, and Uchiha Madara could hear her comforting her mother in a low voice. Now even if they were caught by these robbers, this little girl just closed her eyes tightly. Although they were already trembling with fear, they didn't dare to cry and make a fuss, for fear of angering a few robbers. The robbers pointed their guns at the little girl after a few words, and wanted to use this little girl to press the police outside. Seeing this scene, everyone else in the restaurant had closed their eyes, showing expressions they couldn't bear to watch. Advertisement: her own child was caught and friend right in front of her. This little girl's mother was going crazy. This mother didn't care about the robbers and guns at all, she just wanted to rush forward and snatch her daughter back. But a weak woman is naturally unable to compete with these burly men. One of the big men only needs to push gently with her hand, and the mother is pushed to the ground. The burly man also directly took out the gun in his hand, looked at the mother fiercely, and wanted to turn the button in his hand. In fact, Uchiha Madara could have stood idly by. But that stubborn little girl, and this mother who can give everything for her child, is probably the softest place in Uchiha Madara's heart. So Uchiha Madara, who has been watching all this leisurely, suddenly changed her eyes. Uchiha Madara appeared directly in front of the big man who pointed the gun at his mother, and then pulled his hand over at once. Then Uchiha Madara tapped the robber on the neck very hard, and the robber collapsed to the ground. All this happened so suddenly that no one reacted. Several of the customers could not help but scream. Uchiha Madara glared at them, and these people immediately covered their mouths with wink. These robbers probably thought that these people were ordinary people, and they didn't take it to heart at all, leaving only one person to guard the store. Everyone else went outside and negotiated with the officers, which gave Uchiha Madara a very good chance. Uchiha Madara walked to the door very carefully, saw the situation outside, and then made a gesture to Coulson outside. Although Coulson was a little surprised to see Uchiha Madara here, he was a professional agent and perfectly concealed his emotions. And Coulson kept attracting the kidnappers' attention, so as to create more opportunities for Uchiha Madara. But it was just a few kidnappers, and Uchiha Madara dealt with it very well, and did not waste the opportunity created by Coulson. Advertisement: optimistic about the timing. Uchiha Madara immediately moved to the kidnapper holding the child, grabbed the child, and kicked the kidnapper's gun to the ground. After seeing Uchiha Madara's action, Coulson immediately rushed up with his own agents. Naturally, these kidnappers didn't want to be caught without a fight, and they were still fighting frantically, but after all, the number of kidnappers was not dominant. So although the scene was a little chaotic and several gunshots were heard, no one was injured, and the 3 kidnappers outside were quickly subdued. After the kidnappers were dealt with, the hostages who had been hiding in the restaurant could finally leave the restaurant, and everyone had the smiles of the rest of their lives on their faces. Uchiha Madara returned the little girl to the mother, who kept bowing to Uchiha Madara to express her gratitude. For Uchiha Madara, this is just a matter of convenience, so Uchiha Madara did not take it too seriously. 66 Brother, thank you. When Uchiha Madara said goodbye to the mother and daughter, the little girl broadcasted live here, showing a very sweet smile and said sweetly. His actions were seen by others, and he also expressed gratitude. Uchiha Madara was also very happy and smiled at the little girl. The current situation has nothing to do with Uchiha Madara, so Uchiha Madara naturally wanted to leave, but was stopped by Coulson. Mr. Uchiha, please wait a moment. Coulson's voice came from behind, and Uchiha Madara stopped his steps after hearing it. Lee Dezhou. What's the matter? Is there anything else? There shouldn't be anything about me here, right? Uchiha Madara looked at Coulson and asked. You. It's nothing, but after all, it was with your help that we successfully rescued everyone, so. Coulson looked at Uchiha Madara and replied. But Uchiha Madara has no interest in receiving praise and adoration from others. Really, I'm just doing my best. There should be a lot of things you need to deal with here. 39 Uchiha Madara said meaningfully. Hearing this, Coulson understood. Uchiha Madara didn't want others to bother him with this matter. So Coulson nodded at Uchiha Madara and did not hold back too much. I was very satisfied with Coulson's sense of interest, Uchiha Madara, and when he left, he did not forget to go back to the restaurant and take out all his spoils of the day. Chapter 252 Bonus Advertisement. Chapter 252 Bonus. Although Uchiha Madara's move was particularly strange among the panicked crowd. But after seeing the strength of Uchiha Madara, naturally no one will talk too much about something that shouldn't be said. Coupled with Coulson's guarantee, Uchiha Madara can leave the accident site very easily. As for the others, they probably need to go to the police station to make a record. After Uchiha Madara returned to Marbury's beach house, Tony couldn't help whistling when he saw the large and small bags in Uchiha Madara's hand, revealing a playful smile. I thought you didn't want anything. I didn't think you were crazy about shopping, Tony said jokingly. It was just a joke between friends, so Uchiha Madara was not angry and was calmly sorting out his things. I'm not like you who are entangled in those people and can't get away. Of course I can go on a shopping spree, after all, I have money and spare time, Uchiha Madara retorted. These remarks hit Tony's sore spot, and Tony reached out and rubbed his forehead, then lay down on the sofa all of a sudden. This person is really annoying. There are so many things to say. Doesn't he just want to get my skills? Tony couldn't help but complain. Seeing Tony's bitter expression, 520 Uchiha Madara laughed without any sympathy. Facing Uchiha Madara's unsympathetic laugh, Tony could only stare at Uchiha Madara with wide eyes. However, Uchiha Madara has long been immune to this kind of gaze, and under Tony's gaze, he can sort out his things very calmly. The reason why Tony complained about this in front of Uchiha Madara was that Tony also hoped that Uchiha Madara could help him handle something. But Uchiha Madara didn't answer at all, and Tony couldn't help it, and after sitting for a while, there was something boring that made Jarvis turn on the TV. Originally, Uchiha Madara didn't notice what was on the TV, but after hearing a familiar voice, Uchiha Madara raised her head. The speed of discovering these news media is really fast, and now the news broadcasts just happened to be the kidnapper that Uchiha Madara encountered before. Advertisement. When he saw the police outside and the kidnapper inside shouting, Tony couldn't help but complain. My God, what are these people doing? Is it possible that they can get lost and return after shouting so much? Tony said speechlessly. Uchiha Madara just smiled at Tony's rant, and although he didn't agree, he agreed with it. It was probably too boring, so even without Uchiha Madara's response, Tony could keep talking to himself. Because of his strict control over his identity, Uchiha Madara does not want his face to be seen by others. So Uchiha Madara also put down what was in his hand, sat on the sofa, and started watching the news with Tony. Fortunately, after Uchiha Madara appeared, the report included a mosaic on Uchiha Madara's head. As long as people who are not too familiar with it, generally do not recognize Uchiha Madara. In this world, Uchiha Madara is relatively familiar with only Tony and Miss Potts, so Uchiha Madara is relieved after seeing this. But Tony immediately recognized Uchiha Madara, widened his eyes slightly, and looked at Uchiha Madara with an incredible expression. Is that you who acted bravely? This is incredible. Tony's tone was full of disbelief. Uchiha Madara was not happy to hear Tony's disbelieving tone. Although Uchiha Madara usually does not like to be nosy, but it is rare to be enthusiastic, and there is no need to be like seeing the top 10 wonders of the world. What kind of expression is this? Can't I just be brave once? Am I not like this? Uchiha Madara said dissatisfiedly. Hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Tony made a zipper action on his hand. Of course I don't mean this, AFBB, I'm just a little surprised, you can come across anything, Tony said with a smile. Facing Tony's joke, Uchiha Madara rolled his eyes at Tony and went back to his room. But not long after the break, I heard Jarvis' voice, saying that Coulson came to look for him. Advertisement. Everyone has already arrived. Uchiha Madara can't keep people here, so he sorted himself out and went out to see Coulson. After seeing Uchiha Madara appear, Coulson greeted him with great enthusiasm. Is everything sorted out? You have the time to come here? Uchiha Madara asked with a smile. Yes, all the fish that slipped through the net have been caught, thanks to your help. Coulson's face was also full of smiles. Is there anything I need to do? Shouldn't it be mine? Uchiha Madara asked curiously. It's nothing, it's just thanks to your help this time, so I want to express my gratitude to you. Coulson said to Uchiha Madara very seriously. Just verbal thanks? You guys are too insincere, Shield is so poor. Tony was probably upset and a little upset, and couldn't help but sarcastically said. Now there are more contacts, so Tony's character Coulson has long been used to it. To Tony's sarcasm, Coulson still looked very gentle, and then smiled slightly at Tony. Of course it's not just a verbal thank you, I also applied for a reward for Mr. Uchiha Madara, Coulson said with a smile. Then he saw Coulson took out a check from his pocket and handed it to Uchiha Madara. Unexpectedly, there was such an unexpected harvest. Uchiha Madara took the check and put it in front of him, looking at it with interest. Although Uchiha Madara was already wealthy, he didn't care about such a check for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But this is completely different from the money Uchiha Madara got before. This is the first time Uchiha Madara has gained money for helping others. We have actually been hunting down a few fish that slipped through the net, and even offered a bounty, but we have never had a chance to catch them. They are insidious, cunning and vicious. Coulson briefly explained the current situation, and after hearing this, Uchiha Madara knew why Coulson came to give himself a bonus. These few fish that slipped through the net are also things that Shield has always wanted to solve, but there is simply no chance to solve them. This time, if it wasn't for Uchiha Madara's shot, in the end, for the sake of so many innocent lives in the restaurant, maybe Shield would still choose to compromise. Chapter 253 Rejection Advertisement. Chapter 253 Rejection. Then Tony also came over, took the check in Uchiha Madara's hand and looked at it, and then saw Tony pouted. Only $200,000. These few fish that slipped through the net are too worthless, how come you haven't caught them for so long? Tony said rudely. Of course we can't compare to the Stark Group's wealth, but it is also a little bit of our heart. Coulson endured, and finally couldn't help but retorted. Uchiha Madara also felt a little helpless. Tony was simply driven mad by those people, and now he is talking more and more too much. Tony. Uchiha Madara gave Tony a helpless look, then said. Tony still respects Uchiha Madara very much. Since Uchiha Madara has spoken, Tony will no longer make trouble. Okay, I'll shut up and stop talking. Tony raised his hand and expressed his compromise. It's really not too much, but it's also our little intention, please accept this, Coulson said to Uchiha Madara with a sincere face. Such a small amount of money is really not worth mentioning to Uchiha Madara, but it is also excellent to leave a souvenir, so Uchiha Madara did not refuse. It's also a reward for my hard work, so of course I'll accept it, Uchiha Madara said jokingly. Seeing that Uchiha accepted the check, Coulson was also relieved, and the expression on his face changed a lot. After a few chats, Coulson said to Uchiha Madara in a hesitant tone, "Mr. Uchiha, are you convenient now? I have something to talk to you about." In fact, when Coulson sent a large check, Uchiha Madara knew that Coulson should go to the Three Treasures Hall without incident, and there is always something to look for himself. So after hearing Coulson's words, Uchiha Madara was very calm and not surprised at all. "I just said how could you be so generous all of a sudden, it really is a conspiracy," Tony said sarcastic words on the side. For Tony, Uchiha Madara has completely given up. I don't know what happened, Tony has suddenly become a B***ch now. So Uchiha Madara ignored Tony and answered Coulson's question instead. "Advertisement, I really have nothing to do right now, come with me," Uchiha Madara said very cheerfully, then stood up and took Coulson into the study. When Coulson was about to speak, Uchiha Madara stopped Coulson's move and then called Jarvis out under Coulson's unexplained gaze. Jarvis turned off the recording mode in the room. Uchiha Madara said to Jarvis, "I'm happy to serve you, sir." Jarvis readily agreed to Uchiha Madara's request. After Jarvis left, Uchiha Madara raised his chin and gestured to Coulson, letting Coulson start his speech. "Do you know about our shield?" Coulson asked. Although he didn't know what Coulson was trying to say, Uchiha Madara nodded and replied, "I heard about it, but I don't know your scope of function." 99. Of course, this is to deceive Coulson. After all, Uchiha Madara is also a very acquainted person with fury. Naturally, he knows about shield. After listening to this answer, Coulson nodded slightly towards Uchiha Madara before continuing. "Our shield has always been committed to maintaining the safety of the earth, and we are recruiting some capable people." Coulson's tone was full of pride. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara naturally almost understood that Coulson should be trying to recruit himself to join shield. "So now you want to invite me to join shield?" Uchiha Madara asked very bluntly. Probably did not expect Uchiha Madara to speak so straightforwardly. Coulson was a little surprised, and after a while, he came back to his senses and nodded towards Uchiha Madara. "We are actually a very good department, but for some reasons, the public doesn't know much about it." Coulson quickly spoke good words for shield. However, Uchiha Madara really has no interest in these. If he is interested, Uchiha Madara only needs to show his identity. With Uchiha Madara's previous achievements, you only need to show your identity, and some people will bring Uchiha Madara to the altar. But Uchiha Madara has long been tired of this kind of life, so Uchiha Madara doesn't really care too much about the benefits Coulson listed. After a long talk, Coulson finally stopped and looked at Uchiha Madara with a slightly expectant look. Advertisement 0. For flowers. However, under Coulson's expectant gaze, Uchiha Madara shook his head resolutely, expressing his refusal. "I'm just an ordinary person, and I don't have such great ambitions or such great skills." Uchiha Madara expressed his rejection bluntly. But Coulson didn't seem to want to give up easily, and he still kept praising Uchiha Madara and telling the various achievements of shield. "If you are an ordinary person, there is no real master in the world, and shield really needs to join people like you," Coulson said sincerely. Faced with these pleas, Uchiha Madara remained unmoved and had no interest in joining shield. Point 0. Let's just pretend that I was born to have free S***X. I don't like being restrained. Although he said with a smile, Uchiha Madara's tone was very firm. Facing the very determined Uchiha Madara, Coulson wanted to fight for it, but before Coulson could speak, he was interrupted by Uchiha Madara. "I really have no interest in this matter. I think the current state of life is what I want," Uchiha Madara said seriously. Seeing Uchiha Madara's resolute performance, Coulson stood up very wisely and stopped trying to persuade Uchiha Madara. "Then we also respect your wishes, but if you want to go back, we welcome you at any time," Coulson said to Uchiha Madara very politely. Although Uchiha Madara feels that she will never regret one day, there is no need to say these words. Seeing Coulson stand up, Uchiha Madara also stood up from the main seat, reaching out and shaking Coulson. Originally, this time, Coulson wanted to invite Uchiha Madara to join shield. Now that everything has been said, Coulson naturally left. In any case, although he was rejected by Uchiha Madara, Coulson's performance was also very decent. So when Coulson was leaving, Uchiha Madara also sent Coulson to the door. After saying goodbye to Coulson and returning to the living room, Uchiha Madara smashed herself onto the sofa and stretched out very comfortably. Chapter 254 Visiting the Temple Advertisement. Chapter 254 Visiting the Temple. Seeing Uchiha Madara's actions, Tony couldn't help but laugh. And Tony seems to be very clear about the purpose of Coulson's private conversation with Uchiha class. "Did he want you to join that shield? What kind of messed up department?" Tony complained in very straightforward words. Uchiha Madara was not surprised that Tony knew about Coulson's purpose, nor did he doubt that Tony listened to his conversation with Coulson. After all, Tony had a steel suit and became a superhero. Maybe Coulson and the others also hid Tony. "They are looking for you too. Why didn't you choose to join? I thought you would enjoy this status?" Uchiha Madara looked at Tony curiously and asked. In front of Uchiha Madara, Tony never hides his emotions of May 20th, so he couldn't help rolling his eyes when he heard this. "No one has ever been able to lead Stark, they just changed their method and wanted to get my technology," Tony replied very bluntly. Uchiha Madara is very satisfied with Tony's sobriety at the moment, and only hopes that Tony won't be carried away by the praise from the outside in the future. "It's best if you can figure it out, and hopefully you can stay sane at all times," Uchiha Madara said in a meaningful way. But Tony, who hasn't experienced so much now, may not be able to understand Uchiha Madara's true thoughts, just nodded. Everything can only be truly understood if he has experienced it himself, so Uchiha Madara didn't say much, quietly reminded him a few words, and then went back to his room to rest. After some chaotic things, New York has finally entered a period of peace, and Uchiha Madara is also a little tired of this day-to-day life. Uchiha Madara is also not addicted to alcohol and other things, so after a few days, Uchiha Madara has had enough. So Uchiha Madara decided to go to the temple in Nepal and wanted to talk to Ji about that gem at that time. Before departure, Uchiha Madara also collected a lot of information and found that the temple seems to be a very mysterious place, and most people do not know the existence of the temple. Even Tony didn't know anything about the temple, so Uchiha Madara didn't tell Tony his real destination when he set off. Advertisement. I just said that I feel that life is a little boring, so I want to go out to travel to relax. Although there was some reluctance, Uchiha Madara had nowhere to refute this excuse to find Tony, and could only watch Uchiha Madara leave. I hope you don't travel around the world this time. After all, the steel suit has to be constantly improved. 35. Tony said slightly with Tsunere. Uchiha Madara actually knew that this was Tony's euphemistic retention, but this time Uchiha Madara must go to the temple, so he just smiled at Tony. Touching Tony and waving his hand, Uchiha Madara was ready to go straight away. Now that technology is so advanced, Uchiha Madara doesn't need to use his superpowers all the time, so he just flew to Nepal by plane. Because he had been to the temple once before, Uchiha Madara still remembered the location of the temple very clearly, and reached the temple directly with the ability of teleportation. There is no big difference between the present temple and what Uchiha Madara saw before. The surroundings are covered with white snow, and the air has an unprecedented fresh feeling. Uchiha Madara walked to such a fairyland on Earth, and people felt a lot more relaxed without realizing it. But even though it was daytime, there were no people in the temple. After calling a few times, Uchiha Madara found that no one was coming to receive him, so he stepped forward and walked into the temple. It was very dark inside the temple, and there was no light to be seen, but it seemed that something was guiding Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara quickly walked to the door of a room, and before Uchiha Madara knocked on the door, a very familiar voice came from inside. Come in, the door is unlocked. Uchiha Madara had heard it, and this was Ji Yuyi's voice. But thinking about Ji Yuyi's ability, Ji Yuyi has always been very mysterious, so it is not surprising that Ji Yuyi knew that Uchiha Madara was coming. Raising his eyebrows, Uchiha Madara pushed open the door and walked in. You don't seem to be surprised by my presence? Uchiha Madara walked into the room, picked a chair that was pleasing to the eye, sat down and asked. Because everything is developing according to the established trajectory, Ji Yuyi said something inscrutable. Advertisement. This remark reminded Uchiha Madara a lot. When he first crossed, Uchiha Madara met the Ancient One. At that time, the two were obviously strangers, but Ji Yuyi did not hesitate to hand over the gem with the ability to travel through time and space into his own hands. Thinking about it this way, this behavior is full of weirdness. You know me? Uchiha Madara asked quietly. Hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Ji Yuyi had a smile on his face and replied, I don't know you now. 35. Saying this, the sense of disobedience is even stronger, and it is obvious that Ji Yuyi has something to say. The combination of Uchiha Madara has finally confirmed that the Ancient One has the ability to see through time and space. After all, this is the only way to explain what happened in front of him. However, Uchiha Madara is not someone who breaks the casserole and asks to the end. At least Ji Yu has no malice towards himself, which is certain. If Ji Yuyi wanted to explain this matter, he would have made it clear at the beginning. Now Ji Yuyi has an unpredictable attitude at all, so Uchiha Madara quickly changed the subject. This time, Uchiha Madara came over. In addition to trying to clarify his inner doubts, he wanted to return the time gem to its original owner. 1.1. After all, Ji Yuyi was forced to keep time in the hands of Uchiha Madara from the beginning. Therefore, Uchiha Madara directly took out the time gem in his pocket and handed it to Ji Yuyi. This should be yours. I'll return it to the original owner. It's this gem that the temple has always guarded. Uchiha Madara handed over the time gem without hesitation. But looking at the time gem in front of him, Ji Yuyi smiled and shook his head, and pushed the time gem in front of Uchiha Madara again. It is true that the temple guards the time gem, but this time gem does not belong to the current temple. Ji Yuyi said something very convoluted. What do you mean? This is supposed to belong to the temple. I'm not interested in helping others keep things. Uchiha Madara said curiously. Chapter 255 Advertisement. Chapter 255 Fortunately, Ji Yuyi didn't want to pretend, so he told the reason very directly. Simply put, the temple already has a time gem, so I can't accept it from you. Ji Yuyi explained in a very concise tone. Although what Ji Yuyi said was not very detailed, but Uchiha Madara immediately understood what Ji Yuyi meant after a little thought. Probably because of the interlacing of time and space, there are now 2 time gems in total. Is it because of me? Uchiha Madara asked very directly. Ji Yuyi didn't mean to hide it and nodded very straightforwardly, agreeing with Uchiha Madara's statement. But everything happens in its own way, and you don't need to worry about it, Ji Yuyi said comfortingly after glancing at Uchiha Madara. In fact, Uchiha Madara's silence was just because he was thinking about a problem, which made Ji Yuyi misunderstood. However, Uchiha Madara did not reject Ji Yuyi's kindness and smiled at Ji Yuyi. So now this gem will continue to be kept with me? Uchiha Madara asked, picking up the gem on the table. Faced with this question O5, Gyuyi nodded as a matter of course, saying that it is best to keep the gem in Uchiha Madara's hands. Are you really afraid that I will steal it? The origin of this gem is not ordinary, Uchiha Madara said deliberately. But Gyuyi seemed to really trust Uchiha Madara's character, and when he heard the words, he just smiled and didn't take it seriously. If you wanted to own this gem, you wouldn't send it back now, Gyuyi said in a very trusting tone. Sometimes human nature can't stand the test. How do you know that I can persevere all the time? Uchiha Madara smiled and threw the question back. You are not such a person, I have such confidence. 35 Gyuyi's tone is very firm. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara couldn't help laughing. Since Gyuyi said so, Uchiha Madara is also welcome. Advertisement. He quickly put the gem back in his pocket. Why is it so quiet here? I remember when I came last time, there seemed to be many people studying here. Uchiha Madara looked around and asked. They all have other tasks. Not only Nepal has temples in the world, but there are also several other temples that need to be patrolled regularly, Gyuyi explained. Uchiha Madara just asked casually. After all, it was the temple's own affairs that had nothing to do with Uchiha Madara, so Uchiha Madara quickly skipped this topic. Now that the purpose of this trip has been achieved, Uchiha Madara will not stay any longer and soon stands up to say goodbye to Gyuyi. Since there is nothing to do, then I am ready to go back, Uchiha Madara said goodbye to Gyuyi. When Uchiha Madara turned to leave, Gyuyi suddenly spoke out to keep Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara turned his head and looked at Gyuyi curiously. Is there anything else? Uchiha Madara asked with some doubts. Since you are in charge of guarding the time gem, you are also a member of our temple, so do you want to stay and study? Gyuyi asked very politely. Unexpectedly, there is such an unexpected joy, Uchiha Madara didn't react at once and stood there in a daze. After he came back to his senses, there was joy in Uchiha Madara's eyes. After all, Uchiha Madara had already seen Gyuyi's ability when they first met, which was as gorgeous as the magic depicted in the novel. Before absorbing the energy in the universe cube, Uchiha Madara yearned for the kind of ability Gyuyi possessed. But Uchiha Madara is actually very clear that this is something that only people in the temple can learn, so I haven't had much hope. But I didn't expect that Gyuyi would take the initiative to ask Uchiha Madara to learn, and Uchiha Madara was inevitably surprised for a while. Although Uchiha Madara now has the terrifying ability of the universe cube, the magic used by the Ancient One has simply become an obsession of Uchiha Madara. Therefore, Uchiha Madara nodded in agreement as soon as he came back to his senses. It is my honor and I am very happy to stay, Uchiha Madara said in a very sincere tone. Advertisement. Gyuyi shook his head and said nothing, then said, your ability now is what everyone fears, and I can't teach you much. 39. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara smiled very humbly, but in his heart he admired Gyuyi's ability even more. You must know that apart from Fury and Carol, no one has seen Uchiha Madara's abilities, and Uchiha Madara has kept this a secret very well. But Gyuyi can know this. Gyuyi is indeed not a simple character. Everyone has some secrets of their own, and Uchiha Madara has no habit of inquiring, just pretending that she didn't hear it at all. Now that he had decided to stay in the temple to study for a while, Uchiha Madara made a direct phone call and told Tony that he would not be going back for a while. After a night of rest, Gyuyi took Uchiha Madara to the top of the snowy mountain the next day, ready to start teaching here. I can't teach you a lot, I can only tell you to feel it with your heart. 520. Gyuyi said so much. This is almost the same as not saying it. If he hadn't known Gyuyi's personality, Uchiha Madara would probably think Gyuyi was making fun of himself. Although these remarks are indeed a little speechless, Uchiha Madara still has patience. Just follow the way Gyuyi said, try to feel the elements around you. I have to say that Uchiha Madara really has a talent that other ordinary people are very jealous of. Under such endless teaching, he can actually feel the changes in the air. After feeling the unusual fluctuation, a confident smile appeared on Uchiha Madara's face, and he began to study more seriously. After calming down, time passed very fast, and soon the white snow-capped mountains were shrouded in darkness. At this time, Gyuyi also appeared next to Uchiha Madara again, interrupted Uchiha Madara's study, and said, your progress has been very fast, let's go back. Originally, Uchiha Madara was not someone who was eager for success, but he quickly reminded him from his studies and returned to the temple with Gyuyi. Gyuyi had prepared dinner early in the morning, and Uchiha Madara felt a little unaccustomed to seeing the food. I thought you were all ignorant, so you have to eat too? Uchiha Madara said jokingly. Chapter 256 Tony Calls Advertisement. Chapter 256 Tony Calls. Gyuyi's temper is very good, and he is not angry at all in the face of Uchiha Madara's jokes. Uchiha Madara just said it casually, and soon he was in front of the table and started to enjoy the food prepared by the Ancient One. Probably because he was in a good mood, Uchiha Madara thought the food was especially delicious today. It suits Uchiha Madara's appetite even better than what many 5-star hotels and Michelin restaurants do. The days went by smoothly. Uchiha Madara went to learn spells with Gyuyi every day during the day, and spent the rest of the time wandering around the temple. If it was the previous Uchiha Madara, maybe it would be too boring for such a dull day. But after going through so many things, Uchiha Madara feels that such an ordinary life is truly precious. So Uchiha Madara also just went to the temple to settle some matters from the beginning, and now he decided to stay in the temple for a few more days. Then the time Uchiha Madara stayed in the temple kept getting longer and longer. To be honest, Staying in such a fairyland like Snow-Capped Mountain, Uchiha Madara has simply forgotten the passage of time and doesn't quite know what day it is now. But just when Uchiha Madara was addicted to learning spells, she suddenly received a call from Tony. Seeing Tony's name displayed on the phone, Uchiha Madara knew that such a leisurely life would not last a few days. After all, Tony wouldn't bother Uchiha Madara if it wasn't a big deal. Sure enough, Tony used a very exaggerated tone to express a big news at Carver University. What happened? Don't give a shit, just say it, Uchiha Madara said in a very flat tone. Originally Tony wanted to arouse Uchiha Madara's curiosity, but to be honest, Tony's idea was doomed to fail. Advertisement probably also felt boring, so Tony quickly told what happened in the university. According to Tony's account, a green-skinned monster suddenly appeared in the university, and everyone was terrified. This monster seemed to have no reason and was frantically destroying. And then, did that person catch him? Wouldn't he just let him run away? Uchiha Madara was still more interested in the final outcome. Hearing this question, Tony smiled a little embarrassedly, which Uchiha Madara understood immediately, and it seemed that Tony's meaning was really run away. Staying in the temple, Uchiha Madara studied very seriously every day, and was naturally unaware of what was going on outside. Uchiha Madara was a little surprised when he heard the news at first, but Uchiha Madara lost interest in the news immediately after the surprise. After all, Uchiha Madara is not a journalist, and to be honest, this matter has nothing to do with Uchiha Madara. It's just that there are some losses in the building, people are not serious, and Uchiha Madara is not SHIELD and is responsible for managing these things. So after Tony finished chattering about this, Uchiha Madara was about to hang up and didn't want to continue talking at all. Is this the case? I hung up after I finished speaking. This has nothing to do with me, Uchiha Madara said slightly coldly. Although Uchiha Madara has always behaved like this, Tony is still very dissatisfied with Uchiha Madara's attitude. If it's so realistic, can't we just chat? Tony said a little unhappily. To be honest, Uchiha Madara has always looked at Tony with the eyes of the younger generation, so he is more tolerant of Tony. So after hearing this, Uchiha Madara chuckled and asked, okay, what do you want to talk about? I'll listen. But these words turned Tony's army back, and Tony squeaked for a long time without saying a word. Facing Tony's embarrassing situation, Uchiha Madara laughed unabashedly and quickly ended the somewhat bad conversation. Okay, that's all, I still have some things to do here, Uchiha Madara explained to Tony with a forced smile. Where have you been? You're so busy. You've been out for a long time, when will you be back? In the end, Tony couldn't hold back and asked. Advertisement Uchiha Madara didn't plan to tell Tony about the temple, so after hearing Tony's question, he simply replied. I'm on a snowy mountain now, 55. Your life is so leisurely, I'm too busy to die here, Tony said in a slightly jealous tone. Uchiha Madara also knew that Tony was just joking, so he didn't take it to heart. I'm not like you have a group to take care of, so naturally I live a leisurely life, Uchiha Madara said triumphantly. Hearing Uchiha Madara say this, Tony naturally did not refute, but sighed slightly. Backquote, seriously, when are you coming back? I'm really busy, Tony still put his face down and asked. What's the use of me going back? I don't know anything about managing a group. Miss Potts is more suitable, Uchiha Madara said very firmly. I know, but there are other things that need your help. Apart from you, I don't know anyone else who can be trusted, Tony said in a low voice. Uchiha Madara is actually very aware that Tony has experienced too many things during this time, first being kidnapped, and then betrayed by someone he trusted very much. Even that kidnapping was planned by Obadiah, so now Tony has a little bit of a cup of snake shadow, and Uchiha Madara understands it. But to be honest, Uchiha Madara has always advocated free-range education. Rather than going back to help Tony, Uchiha Madara hopes that Tony can come out and buy it himself. However, it was rare for Tony, Lees, to let go of his pride and be willing to express his inner thoughts, so Uchiha Madara did not directly attack Tony. Wait for me to finish the matter here, it may take a few days, I will come back as soon as possible, Uchiha Madara said vaguely. Although Uchiha Madara did not immediately agree to go back, Tony was very satisfied after getting such an answer. Well, I hope you can come back as soon as possible, then I won't disturb you. Tony said goodbye to Uchiha Madara very contentedly. Although he said so, after hanging up the phone, Uchiha Madara completely forgot about it and walked directly to the library. There are so many books in the temple, almost the same as the city library. Therefore, if Uchiha Madara is not practicing spells these days, then he will completely soak himself in the library. Chapter 257 Jealousy Advertisement Chapter 257 Jealousy. However, there are some differences between the books in this book and the books in the library. The books in this book are all about the origin of magic. Uchiha Madara noticed that one of the bookcases was pitch black, with no light shining on it. And these books actually exude a dark atmosphere that cannot be described in words at all. But this feeling is very strange, so Uchiha Madara unconsciously raised his legs and walked over to the bookshelf. Just as Uchiha Madara stretched out his hand and was about to touch the book on it, a figure suddenly appeared nearby. These books cannot be read, a man said in a slightly low voice. Hearing this voice, Uchiha Madara looked up and looked in that direction, and saw a medium-sized, slightly chubby man appearing in front of his shoes. Since he can appear here, it means that this person must also be a person in the temple, so Uchiha Madara is not angry, but just withdraws his hand. Why can't you read it? Since it's a book, it should be read, Uchiha Madara asked curiously. This is dark magic, which already belongs to the category of forbidden technique, even the Ancient One can't touch it. The man explained to Uchiha Madara very patiently. Since it happened for a reason, Uchiha Madara naturally wouldn't mind, and quickly took back his curiosity and turned to disturb the person in front of him. Seeing Uchiha Madara's slightly curious eyes, the man in front of him smiled at Uchiha Madara, with an inexplicable honesty. You can call me the king, I am also one of the guardians of the temple. Wang took the lead in extending his hand to Uchiha Madara, expressing his goodwill. Now that Wangdu has expressed his kindness, Uchiha Madara is not so indifferent and responded. Uchiha Madara, now studying in the temple. Uchiha Madara also briefly introduced himself. Wang seems to have a very good understanding of this library, and briefly introduced it to Uchiha Madara. Advertisement. After a few chats, Uchiha Madara still has a very good impression of Wang, who is a very down-to-earth and very hardworking person. Then the king was going to take Uchiha Madara to meet other people, because there are 4 temples in the world, so they go to other temples to communicate with each other from time to time. When Uchiha Madara came, AFBB, it happened to be communication time, and now everyone is back. Now Uchiha Madara is also an external staff member of the temple, so it is very necessary to get to know his other colleagues. There were very few people in the temple, and Uchiha Madara remembered everyone immediately after the king introduced himself. Everyone is very friendly to Uchiha Madara, but there is one person Uchiha Madara thinks that this person's identity is strange. When the man named Modo shook hands with Uchiha Madara, he used a very strong hand, and Uchiha Madara noticed a sneer on Modo's face. Probably out of jealousy, because according to Wang's introduction, Modu was Jiyuyi's apprentice, but Modu did not have the right to enter the library to read books at will. Although Modu is very jealous of Uchiha Madara, to Uchiha Madara, Modu is nothing more than an irrelevant person. Therefore, Uchiha Madara fought back without hesitation, and Modu probably knew that Uchiha Madara was not a soft persimmon, so he accepted his own tricks. The most important reason should be that Modu didn't dare to make trouble with Uchiha Madara at all. Sir, how long are you going to stay here? How did you meet the master? Mordo began to change his approach, walked to Uchiha Madara's side, and began to talk. But because he knew that Modu had bad intentions towards him, Uchiha Madara was always very vigilant, and he just smiled very calmly when he heard the words. It's just a coincidence, who knows when to go back? Uchiha Madara replied lukewarmly. Unexpectedly, Uchiha Madara was so inhumane, the expression on Modu's face became a little stiff, and finally he pulled out an embarrassed smile. Even so, Modu quickly sorted out his mood, and then came over again. To be honest, Uchiha Madara has been very impatient for a long time, and it has only been because of the face of the Ancient One, and he has not turned his face. But Modu was so ignorant, so Uchiha Madara didn't want to endure it any longer. Advertisement, instead of caring about me here, you might as well go to the library to learn some useful spells, Uchiha Madara said indifferently. Hearing this, Mordo couldn't control his emotions at all, and a look of resentment appeared on his face. In fact, Uchiha Madara was completely intentional, and these words were completely poking at the heart of Modu. Because the library is managed by the king will select people to enter the library. Not everyone is qualified to go in and read books. Obviously, Mordo still does not have this qualification. It is precisely because of this that the first time he met Uchiha Madara in Mordo, he appeared so unfriendly. To Mordo, Uchiha Madara wasn't even an outside editor, just someone who came out of nowhere. But Ji expressed his preference for Modu Uchiha Madara, and even Wang did not express any dissatisfaction when Uchiha Madara entered the library. Uchiha Madara also wanted to study hard in the temple, and he didn't care about little people like Mordo at all. After saying these words, Uchiha Madara glanced at Mordo coldly, then turned and left. Have you had a conflict with Mordo? Uchiha Madara walked to Uchiha's side and asked in a familiar tone. Hearing this tone, Uchiha Madara couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, and there was such an expression on his face. What exactly is the standard for a disciple of Ji Yisho? Uchiha Madara also pointedly asked. There is no standard, it just depends on fate. Ji replied calmly, but Uchiha Madara was not surprised by this answer. In fact, Modu's character has always been like this, and Ji also hopes to change him, Wang sighed and said. This is indeed what Ji can do. Although Ji is a very cold person in terms of temperament, in fact, Ji's heart is very soft. Uchiha Madara is skeptical of the outcome of the change, though, and Mordo doesn't seem to have learned anything from the otherworldliness of the old one. Obviously listening to the king's tone, this fact is also very clear. Chapter 258 Framed Advertisement Chapter 258 Framed. Knowing that Ji was completely out of good intentions, Uchiha Madara didn't say anything sarcastic, but he was still very dissatisfied with this matter in his heart. After all, Modu couldn't express his kindness to a stranger like Uchiha Madara, and even kept trying to embarrass Uchiha Madara. Then it means that Mordo has no growth at all in the temple, and some people completely conform to the saying that human beings are inherently evil at the beginning. But this is Ji Yishu's apprentice in the end, and it has nothing to do with Uchiha Madara, so Uchiha Madara just walked aside with a faint expression. Listening to Wang chattering about the things in the temple, Uchiha Madara himself did not express much opinion. As he spoke, Wang took a deep breath, and then showed a slightly embarrassed smile at Uchiha Madara. Sorry, am I talking too much, but it's just that I rarely meet someone who can talk to me, Wang Yang said in a somewhat apologetic tone. Because he still admires Wang very much, Uchiha Madara didn't care about these little things, and smiled slightly and shook his head at Wang. It's okay, I'm also very curious about the things in the temple, you can say more, Uchiha Madara said very sincerely. Seeing that Uchiha Madara was not angry, Wang was also relieved. After all, Wang did not want to give away the rare guests because of himself. In fact, Mordo's magic talent is very high, but her character is indeed a little stubborn, Wang said softly. Modu's character Uchiha Madara has already seen it, and if he wants to be the apprentice of the Ancient One, then Modu is indeed the kind of person who is very talented. After all, Uchiha Madara is an outsider to those in the temple. Therefore, Uchiha Madara would not be foolish enough to speak ill of their companions in front of the people in the temple. So after hearing the king's words, Uchiha Madara just smiled. Maybe this is the common problem of genius is always proud, Uchiha Madara said lightly. In fact, Wang didn't want to get any particularly constructive answers from Uchiha Madara, but he just held back for a long time and wanted to find someone to complain. Advertisement, I hope this is just a small problem shared by some geniuses, and don't go down the wrong road, Wang said helplessly. Probably not wanting to talk about this sensitive topic, Wang quickly changed the topic and introduced other temples to Uchiha Madara. This is actually a new world that Uchiha Madara has never been exposed to, so Uchiha Madara listened with great interest and did not find it boring at all. I have to say that Wang is the administrator of the book collection pavilion, and he has a very rich knowledge reserve, so many ordinary things can be told very interestingly. After spending a few days with Wang, Uchiha Madara immediately fell in love with Wang's wit and humor, and became close friends with Wang. The days went by without any surprises. Uchiha Madara practiced every day, and then went to the library to look up previous books. Although Modu disliked Uchiha Madara very much, he always wanted to find out a mistake of Uchiha Madara, but Uchiha Madara lived an extremely regular life every day. In addition, Uchiha Madara has always been wary of Modu, so he did not give Modu any opportunity. Uchiha Madara just returned to his room to lie down and rest after finishing everything for one night. But as soon as he entered the room, Uchiha Madara noticed something was wrong. Uchiha Madara was very keenly aware of the subtle changes in the layout of his room. Although the change is very small, Uchiha Madara has a slight obsessive-compulsive disorder. Everything is placed regularly, and the angle is exactly the same every day. It is precisely such a habit that Uchiha Madara can immediately notice the slightest difference. The current situation is obviously that someone has entered Uchiha Madara's room. This candidate does not need to think carefully, and it can be determined that it must be Modu. Uchiha Madara sneered, then walked to the side of his bed, lifted the sheets, and put his head under the bed. Then he found several black-covered books thrown under the bed, and when he took out the book and looked at it, Uchiha Madara found that it was a dark magic book that was listed as a forbidden book. The evidence was in front of him, and Uchiha Madara immediately understood what Modu meant. It was all about trying to frame things. 0. For flowers. Advertisement dark magic is a forbidden technique, and no one is qualified to touch it. Modu probably wanted to use this method to drive Uchiha Madara out of the temple, which also confirmed the pressure that Uchiha Madara brought to Modu from the side. Unexpectedly, Mordo would resort to such a rude means. A trace of disdain flashed in Uchiha-like eyes, and then he sat down on the bed. Next, Modu will definitely bring people over, so Uchiha Madara doesn't plan to rest anymore, so he simply waits for Mo to come over. Sure enough, after a while, there was some chaotic footsteps in the corridor outside, and then there was a knock on Uchiha Madara's door. Probably Modu wanted to make this a big issue, and then took the opportunity to drive Uchiha Madara away, so the crowd was very complete, and everyone in the temple came. Uchiha Madara had already seen through Mordo's scheme, so he acted very calm. What's the matter? What happened? Why did you all come to my room? Uchiha Madara asked innocently. Before Ji and Wang could speak, Modu jumped out unwillingly and pointed at Uchiha Madara with his own finger. Don't pretend, I have seen it with my own eyes, Mordo said in a very excited tone. What did you see? You said it, Uchiha Madara replied casually without putting Mordo's provocation on him. It is because of Uchiha Madara's lighthearted attitude that it made Mordo even more angry. Are you still pretending? You brought back the dark magic book from the library, Mordo said angrily. So what? Uchiha Madara asked innocently. The veins on Modu's neck burst out from Uchiha Madara's anger, and his hands were clenched into fists. In the end, it was probably because Ji and Wang Du were here, so Modu took a deep breath and a sinister smile appeared on his face. Don't think about quibbling. The magic book is definitely still in your room now. Do you dare to let us go in and search it? Modu asked proudly. Probably Modu felt that his plan was seamless, so he couldn't wait to complete the plan, and then he could drive Uchiha Madara away smoothly. Chapter 259 Debunking Advertisement Chapter 259 Debunking. What kind of thing are you? What qualifications do you have to enter my room to search? Uchiha Madara asked with a cold face. You're just showing your guilty conscience after the plan was exposed. If you really didn't do anything, let us in. 33 Mordo started to be aggressive. Modu looks like he doesn't cry without seeing the coffin, so Uchiha Madara doesn't bother to care about such a stupid person. So Uchiha Madara quickly stepped aside and said, then come in. After receiving permission from Uchiha Madara, a flash of ecstasy flashed in Modu's eyes, but he finally managed to control himself with all his strength. Then Mordo couldn't wait to rush into Uchiha Madara's room. However, Modu was still a little sensible. He didn't walk directly under the bed. Instead of, May 23rd, he pretended to flip through the table and other places. If Modu's eyes didn't keep looking under the bed, then this would be a very good show, and it was completely impossible to see that Modu was doing it on purpose. In Uchiha Madara's eyes, there is not much difference between Mordo and the clown, so Uchiha Madara folded his hands and leaned against the door to watch Mordo's every move. Uchiha Madara saw Mordo slowly move to the bottom of the bed, then reached in and took out 2 dark magic books. Then Modu seemed to grab the handle of Uchiha Madara, with a very proud expression on his face, turned around and pointed at Uchiha Madara. Now that the evidence is in front of you, what else do you have to quibble about? Your motives were impure from the beginning. Mordo began to question. Ji Yi and Wang's expressions were very calm, and they didn't seem to be confused by Modu, but other ordinary students couldn't help but talk about it. After all, these people have spent more time with the catalog, and now that Mordo has come up with key evidence, they will naturally favor Mordo. Uchiha Madara didn't pay attention to the whispers of other people at all, but looked at Mordo with a smile on his face. At first, Mordo was full of confidence, but under the watchful eyes of Uchiha Madara, Mordo suddenly felt a little guilty. Advertisement, however, Modu touched the 2 books in his hand, and suddenly regained his confidence, raised his neck and confronted Uchiha Madara. Seeing Moduo acting so clever, Uchiha Madara suddenly lost interest, and didn't want to talk nonsense with Modu anymore, so he put out the evidence directly. You said you saw me taking the book out, why didn't you stop it then? When did you see it? Uchiha Madara asked with a cold face. Just before dinner in the evening, I watched you rush out of the library with these 2 books in your hand, Mordo insisted. Originally, Uchiha Madara thought that Modu had thought of some perfect plan, but he did not expect such a flawed lie. Uchiha Madara really lost interest. You have to make up a lie in a decent way. I think you are the one who doesn't cry without seeing the coffin, Uchiha Madara said with a sneer. Then, under Modo's terrified eyes, Uchiha Madara took out his computer and turned on the surveillance screen. Look for yourself, it's clear what's right and what's wrong, I don't want to say more, Uchiha Madara said to the others with little interest. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, other people gathered around, very curious about what kind of evidence Uchiha Madara is the master. After hitting the play button, everyone was staring at Uchiha Madara's screen. There is a person beside him who is staring at him, always trying to frame himself. Uchiha Madara is naturally impossible to let go. So Uchiha Madara made preparations early and installed a surveillance camera on the door of his room, which just recorded the process of Modu's crime. It can be clearly seen from the surveillance screen that at the time that Modu said, it was Modu himself who sneaked to the door of Uchiha Madara. Then Modu seemed guilty of being a thief and looked to the right, because life in the temple was very comfortable, so Uchiha Madara was not locked, and there were no valuables. So Modu directly pushed open the door and walked in. After a while, Modu came out of the room, looked around again, and left in a panic. It can be clearly seen that Mordo was holding something in his hand before entering Madara's room, but when he came out, there was nothing in his hand. It is already clear who brought these 2 dark magic books into Uchiha Madara's room, and there is no need to say any more. Advertisement: the people in the temple are not fools, and they naturally understand when they see this. This is a play directed and acted by Mordo. Before, Modu was just arrogant and did not allow others to surpass himself. But others often don't think about it. Mordo would actually frame things for his own selfish desires. The faces of Ji Yi and Wang were already ashen, and Ji Yi looked at Modu with disappointment in his eyes. His own scheme was exposed in such a naked way. Modu's cultivation was still not enough, and the expression on his face was very flustered. All the evidence has been put in front of him, and Modu is also very clear that he has been unable to argue about this matter. But Mordo was also very afraid of losing the opportunity to study in the temple, so Mordo quickly made a decision. Therefore, Modu bowed deeply towards Ji Yi, saying that this matter was entirely because he was jealous for a while, and he did it because he was obsessed with his mind. I have to say that Modu was really able to put down his face and cry bitterly in front of so many people. I just hope that Ji Yi can give himself another chance. Facing Mordo, who kept crying, Ji Yi sighed helplessly, and then set his eyes on Uchiha Madara. You shouldn't apologize to me. You should apologize to Mr. Uchiha Madara 1.1, he is the real victim, Ji Yi said in a somewhat disappointed tone. Hearing Ji Yi's remarks, Modu immediately stood on the spot and did not move for a long time. It can be seen that he is very reluctant to apologize to Uchiha Madara. The reason why the Ancient One admitted his mistake was probably just to stay in the temple, not that Mordo really realized his mistake. Uchiha Madara couldn't help rolling his eyes for such a stubborn person, and he didn't want to talk to such a person at all. Since the matter is settled, the others should leave first. Let's deal with this matter first. Uchiha Madara glanced at Ji Yi and said in a questioning tone. For Uchiha Madara's arrangement, Ji Yi did not have any opinion and soon left with Wang and Modu. Chapter 260 Punishment Advertisement. Chapter 260 Punishment. After everyone sat down, Ji Yi looked at Modu, who was standing in front of him with his head lowered, with a slightly disappointed look. None of the 4 of them spoke, and the atmosphere in the room was about to freeze for a while. Finally, Ji Yi sighed softly and broke the silence. Why do such a thing? He has no grievances with you. Ji Yi looked at Modu calmly and asked. Although Ji Yi's expression is very calm, but Ji Yi's eyes have the ability to see through everything, and Modu feels that all his thoughts have nowhere to hide in front of Ji Yi. In the end, Modu could only tilt his head to prevent Ji Yi from seeing his eyes. Answer my question. Ji Yi's tone was filled with anger, and Moro trembled in fright. It was rare to see Ji Yi so angry, and Mo Du also knew that it would be useless to continue to escape, so Mo Du finally raised his head again. How could he have no grievances with me? He stole what should have belonged to me. Mordo looked at Uchiha Madara with very resentful eyes. Originally, Uchiha Madara sat in a chair and watched the play very leisurely, but Uchiha Madara was not happy when she heard this. Mo Du is just a loser in the eyes of the live broadcast class, so Uchiha Madara doesn't feel that he needs to snatch anything from Mo Du. I don't like to hear that, but you talk about seeing what I stole from you. Uchiha Madara glanced at Mordo and said casually. Uchiha Madara's unconcerned attitude actually hit Mordo's sore spot. What Moro desperately wanted to get was exactly what Uchiha Madara didn't take seriously, and Moro was naturally going to be mad. Since you came here, you have stole everyone's attention. This kind of treatment should belong to me, Mordo said emotionally. Nothing should belong to you in the first place. If you are not convinced, you will try to surpass me. Now everyone is still capable, Uchiha Madara said with disgust. If he could understand this truth, Mordo would not have done such a thing. Advertisement. Even though Uchiha Madara has put the truth in front of him, Modu still looks like I don't listen to me. You are just an outsider, not even a person from the temple, why can you enjoy such treatment? Moduman complained. This is just like a grievance woman. Uchiha Madara doesn't understand how a person who learns magic can develop such a character. This is really weird. But from these few words, Uchiha Madara has also seen that Modu is completely helpless. So Uchiha Madara didn't want to waste words with Moduo, so Uchiha Madara kicked the burden back to Jiuyi and Wang directly. What are you going to do with him? This thing is so bad, there must always be some punishment. Uchiha Madara asked Jiuyi's eyes. Of course, everyone is responsible for what they do. Jiuyi nodded at Uchiha Madara and assured him. Then Jiuyi put his eyes on him and stood on top of Moro in front of him with a face full of dissatisfaction. Do you know what's wrong? Jiuyi asked calmly. Things have already developed to this point, and it seems that Modu doesn't need to continue to endure anymore, and lifts his chin with a face of dissatisfaction. I'm not wrong. What's wrong is that you are so partial to an outsider, yet so harsh to me, Mordo said in a very angry tone. You even allowed him to flip through those books at will, and my book was rejected several times. In fact, this is not entirely because of Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara is just a fuse. Mordo had some dissatisfaction with Jiuyi and Wang from the beginning. Modu thinks that he is the direct disciple of Jiuyi and will be the master of the temple in the future, so Modu hopes that his identity is different from others. Before Uchiha Madara didn't come, Modu would do everything better than others. But ordinary students are too lazy to care about Mordo, so they give Mordo an illusion that he is really different. Now after Uchiha Madara came, this dream of Modu was shattered, so Modu burst out all of a sudden. Advertisement, you still don't understand, everyone is the same here, 99 Wang said in a very disappointed tone. I'll give you one last chance, go to the snowy mountain to reflect on yourself, otherwise you can leave the temple directly. Jiuyi closed his eyes and said in a cold tone. Modu was obviously very angry after hearing the punishment from Jiyu and himself, his hands were clenched into fists, and he suddenly raised his head. But after hearing the intentional threat, Modu Sheng took a breath, forcibly endured it, and then nodded. When you think about it, I will continue to teach you spells, Jiuyi warned very seriously. Understood. Modu said reluctantly and then left, his back was full of loneliness. After Modu left, Jiuyi looked at Uchiha Madara apologetically, and apologized to Uchiha Madara on behalf of Modu. No, it's not you who did the wrong thing, whoever did it is responsible. Uchi 523 Madara replied calmly. Do you really think it's useful to let him go to the snow-capped mountains to relax? He didn't realize his mistake at all. Wang Sum disagreed and said to Jiuyi. Although Wang had already expressed his disapproval, Jiuyi still wanted to give Modu a chance and did not want to give up Modu. Give him another chance, I hope he can figure it out, Jiuyi sighed helplessly. He just felt unbalanced all of a sudden, maybe after a while he will understand after I leave, Uchiha Madara said casually. This matter can be considered to be over, Uchiha Madara doesn't want to care about anything for Jiuyi's face, and Modu has already received the punishment he deserves. Compared to going to the snowy mountain to reflect, perhaps losing face in front of everyone, being exposed by Uchiha Madara made Mordo feel even more uncomfortable. Obviously, Uchiha Madara prefers to give a person a psychological setback rather than defeating a person physically, which can be seen from the Mordo incident. Modu's heart should be very tormented now, and Uchiha Madara has achieved his goal, so there is no need to be aggressive at all, and the days will continue. Probably too embarrassing, Uchiha Madara never saw Mordo appear in the temple in the following days. Chapter 261 Tracking Advertisement Chapter 261 Tracking. Without Mordo messing around, Uchiha Madara doesn't have to be vigilant all the time, so the next day is very comfortable. Other people have more or less the experience of being bullied by Modu, so Uchiha Madara was able to fight back against Modu, and the favorability of these people for the live broadcast class rose all of a sudden. In the days that followed, Uchiha Madara noticed that other people were much warmer to him and often gave him small gifts. Although life in the temple is indeed very good, Uchiha Madara is not a person here, so it is impossible to live in the temple. After studying the spells for 7 or 8 years, Uchiha Madara bid farewell to the Ancient One, and the Ancient One did not retain Uchiha Madara much. If you have any questions, you can come to the temple to find me, I have always been here, Jiuyi said to Uchiha Madara with a flat face. I have always known that Gyuyi has such a character, but Uchiha Madara also thinks it is very normal, and the gentleness of friendship is Uchiha Madara's preferred way of getting along. Compared with Gyuyi's calmness, Wang's emotions have to be released a lot, and he expresses his reluctance very directly. It's okay, I'll be back when I have the chance, and you can come to me, and I'll definitely treat you well. Uchiha Madara patted Wang's shoulder and said with a smile. The news of returning Uchiha Madara didn't tell anyone, just carried a very simple luggage and returned to the beach villa in Malibu. As soon as he entered the villa, Uchiha Madara was greeted very warmly by Jarvis. Mr. Uchiha, you are finally back, sir, he misses you very much. Jarvis's voice was as sweet as ever. Uchiha Madara laughed and replied, he doesn't want me, he wants free labor. After a few chats with Jarvis, Uchiha Madara asked about Tony's location. Uchiha Madara had been sitting in the living room for so long, but no one came out to greet him, which was obviously not normal. Mr. has a guest to entertain, it seems to be for Mark II. Jarvis explained to Uchiha Madara very patiently. Advertisement, Mark II. What is that? Why haven't I heard of it? Could it be a steel suit? Uchiha Madara's face was filled with confusion. Jarvis gave a positive answer to Uchiha Madara's conjecture, and Tony was boring enough to name the suits. Since Tony had something to do, Uchiha Madara didn't want to do Tai Chi with those people, so Uchiha Madara went out after explaining to Jarvis. Uchiha Madara grabbed a car key and rode away from the beach in the jurisprudence department. But on the road, Uchiha Madara always felt weird. He glanced at the rearview mirror and found that although it was very hidden, there were indeed a few small tails following him. After noticing the people who were following him, Uchiha Madara sneered, and then stepped on the accelerator to maximize the horsepower. This area is a typical wealthy area, so there are not many vehicles on the road, but it gives Uchiha Madara a thrill of racing. The people behind them noticed that Uchiha Madara was picking up speed, and they quickly caught up. However, although there are not many vehicles on the road, the people who come and go are all rich and expensive, so these people do not dare to be too rash, for fear of offending some great big man. Uchiha Madara was very curious about who would send people to follow him, so he didn't plan to completely throw away these people behind him at first. After teasing the group of people behind him for a while, Uchiha Madara drove the car directly to a relatively remote beach and stopped the car. It is now just in the evening, and the afterglow of the sunset against the blue water is especially magnificent. Uchiha Madara climbed to the top of the car and admired the scenery of the sky very leisurely, without paying any attention to the group of people behind him. In the end, the people behind him couldn't hold back, they stopped the car, and then slowly approached Uchiha Madara. In fact, Uchiha Madara had heard the footsteps behind him, but he didn't want to pay attention to these people at all. After all, it was obvious that these people were asking for him. Soon the people behind him approached and asked, is this Mr. Uchiha Madara? Our leader wants to meet you. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara stretched a little lazily, and then turned to look at the group of men in black behind him. Advertisement, meet me. Who is your master qualified to see me? Uchiha Madara asked arrogantly. I didn't expect to get such an answer. The faces of the black-clothed men turned sour in an instant, suppressing their anger and looking at Uchiha Madara. I think you should not be too proud, otherwise, we sincerely invite you to come over, the leading man in black said threateningly. However, Uchiha Madara was not frightened. Such verbal threats had no effect on Uchiha Madara, but aroused Uchiha Madara's rebellious heart. If I don't go, what can you do? Uchiha Madara raised her eyebrows and asked with a calm expression. Then don't blame us for being rude. The men in black pulled out the guns in their hands and pointed at Uchiha Madara. I don't know why I can always meet so many people who don't have eyes these days. Uchiha Madara frowned in annoyance. I'll see how impatient you guys can be. Uchiha Madara's face suddenly turned cold, and he said in a very indifferent tone. Then when the men in black started to move, Uchiha Madara teleported directly behind them, and used his hands and feet to subdue the men in black. Immediately afterwards, Uchiha Madara pointed at the head of the black man with the gun he had just snatched from the man in black. That's what you said, you're welcome, I think you're quite polite to me, Uchiha Madara said sarcastically. Although he was a little unconvinced in his heart, but now that his life was in the hands of Uchiha Madara, these men in black naturally did not dare to resist. Aren't you curious about who our boss is? The man in black asked reluctantly. However, such a threat had no effect on Uchiha Madara, who casually played with the gun in his hand. I'm not curious, anyway, after you die, he will definitely send someone to come look for me, Uchiha Madara said in a very casual tone. Probably did not expect that Uchiha Madara would act so decisively, and these men in black were also taken aback. But people had to bow their heads under the eaves, and these men in black finally saw the situation in front of them clearly. Chapter 262 The Master Appears Advertisement Chapter 262 The Master Appears. After realizing that Uchiha Madara was not joking at all, the men in black immediately changed their attitudes. Sir, we were too ignorant of etiquette before, I apologize to you. The man in black, who was pointed at the head by Uchiha Madara, said sincerely. But after seeing that Uchiha Madara didn't have any reaction, the man in black was also a little flustered and quickly asked for mercy. Sir, if you want to bring anything, we will definitely bring it back to the master, as long as you can spare our lives. After hearing that the leading men in black began to beg for mercy, the other men in black also opened their mouths, hoping that Uchiha Madara could let him go. In fact, Uchiha Madara is not a bloodthirsty madman, and he didn't plan to settle all these men in black at the beginning. And Uchiha Madara also asked these black people to bring pictures for him, so after hearing this, Uchiha Madara slowly took back the gun in his hand. Isn't it better to say this earlier? I don't want to make things so ugly. You talk about you. Uchiha Madara said with a sneer on the corner of his mouth. For Uchiha Madara's cheap and good-looking appearance, these people in black still forced a flattering smile on their faces, echoing Uchiha Madara incessantly. Okay, don't flatter yourself, give me all the next words, and take them back to your master without a word. Uchiha Madara restrained her expression and said with a serious face. These people in black naturally did not dare to refute Uchiha Madara's words. He kept nodding his head, for fear that Uchiha Madara would change his mind in the next second. Tell your master to come to see me in person, I won't go to see some stinky mice hiding in the stinky ditch. Uchiha Madara said with a cold face. Hearing this, the expressions on the faces of the men in black suddenly became very embarrassed. Uchiha Madara pulled down his face and looked at the men in black friendly. What, do you have any problem? Uchiha Madara said, playing with the gun in his hand. Seeing Uchiha Madara's movements, these men in black shook their heads in a very uniform manner. Advertisement, no problem, we will definitely bring your words, the leading black man said seriously. Why don't you get out of here, do you want me to escort you back? Uchiha Madara asked impatiently, seeing the people in black still standing there. After hearing Uchiha Madara's voice, these talents hurriedly ran towards the car behind them like waking up from a big dream, for fear that Uchiha Madara would be left here 1 second later. When these people were about to get into the car, Uchiha Madara also raised his voice and shouted, remember, take my words with you or else. Uchiha Madara's unfinished words were full of threats, and the people in black nodded quickly after hearing it, and only after replying to Uchiha Madara dared to get in the car and drive away. Originally, I was ready to go out for racing, but these people completely ruined Uchiha Madara's mood, so Uchiha Madara drove back directly. So much time wasted outside, so by the time Uchiha Madara returned, Tony was done. Seeing Uchiha Madara, Tony was obviously very surprised and showed a very bright smile to Uchiha Madara. However, Uchiha Madara noticed that after not seeing each other for so long, the expression on Tony's face was not very good, and he seemed to be a lot haggard. What happened? I see that your face is haggard, Uchiha Madara asked with concern. Hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Tony had a slightly embarrassed expression on his face, then shook his head in denial and said, it may be that I am too tired recently, what can happen to me? Hearing this, Uchiha Madara just nodded and said nothing more. But no one came to disturb Uchiha Madara for the next few days, but Uchiha Madara knew very well that the legendary master would not give up. AFBB, sure enough, when Uchiha Madara went to a well-known Western restaurant for dinner, she saw people in the restaurant leaving one by one. In the end, the restaurant was completely empty, there were no customers other than Uchiha Madara, and the waiter didn't know where to go. Seeing this increasingly bizarre environment, Uchiha Madara naturally understood. First, he put down the knife and fork in his hand, and then sat in the position calmly, waiting for the arrival of the legendary master. Advertisement. Soon there was a sound of sonorous footsteps. Uchiha Madara raised his head casually, and found an old man in a suit and leather shoes appeared in front of him. Although the wrinkles on his face betray the age of this person, it has to be said that his mental outlook is still very good. After seeing Uchiha Madara raise his head, he also showed a false smile. But the good mood of eating by himself was ruined, so Uchiha Madara just gave this person a cold look. If you have anything to say, just say it directly, everyone is a 1,000-year-old fox, so don't pretend. Uchiha Madara said coldly. When asking for help, the old man was very kind, and he was not angry at Uchiha Madara's attitude. Young man, don't be so impatient, introduce yourself, you can call me Ross. This one held out a hand towards Uchiha Madara. But Uchiha Madara just raised his head slightly and glanced at the hand with his eyes, and there was no need to ask at all. Just say something, I don't think you came here to chat with me, Uchiha Madara said impatiently. After seeing Uchiha Madara's attitude, this person retracted his hand without any embarrassment, and then smiled at Uchiha Madara. Everyone is a smart person, so I won't speak in secret. You and Tony developed the steel suit together, right? Ross finally stated his purpose. Then I think your message is wrong, I'm just passing the tools beside me. Uchiha Madara didn't lift Kaido either. It's boring. You said it yourself first, and everyone should not hide it, Ross said meaningfully to Uchiha Madara. Now that you know, what else do you ask? Uchiha Madara asked rhetorically. Uchiha Madara said that Ross was turned against the First Army, but he quickly adjusted the expression on his face. Well, let's be sincere. I'm here for the steel suit. You can make a price, Ross said very loudly. But after hearing this, Uchiha Madara laughed mercilessly. Chapter 263 Counterattack Advertisement. Chapter 263 Counterattack. Then what do you think? The price is right. It's the first time I've seen someone throwing money at me. Uchiha Madara's tone had an irresistible smile. Facing the laughing Uchiha Madara, Ross's hands on the table were already clenched into fists, and the veins had burst out. But in the end, Ross just took a deep breath and suppressed his temper. I am really sincere to ask you to buy this technology, you should think about it, Ross said in a very serious tone. But it is precisely because of this seriousness that it makes this matter even more funny. Uchiha Madara never imagined that someone would actually be so foolish as to come to him to buy the technology of the steel suit. I am also serious, why should I sell it to you? Since you want to buy it, you should understand the benefits that this technology can bring me. Uchiha Madara has some speechless words. If I want to make money off this technology, I can be a billionaire tomorrow, and I think you know what I mean. 99. Uchiha Madara's remarks are very serious, and I hope the person in front of him can dispel this idea as soon as possible. But if Ross doesn't know what to do, Uchiha Madara won't be merciful. But in the face of Uchiha Madara's straightforward attitude, Ross still sat motionless across from Uchiha Madara and had no intention of giving up. Of course I know, but this business is not easy to do, and some people are interested in this business. Ross looked at Uchiha Madara and said. So what? It was obvious that Ross had something to say, so Uchiha Madara asked Ross's meaning. Hearing this question from Uchiha Madara, a smug smile appeared on Ross's face, as if seeing the dawn of victory. Obviously you need a strong backstage, and I'm obviously your best partner, Ross said confidently. Uchiha Madara is really going to be amused by Ross again, and he doesn't understand where Ross got his courage. Advertisement, I think if I work with Tony, maybe I will be more happy, Uchiha Madara said with a smile. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, the confident expression on Ross's face could not be maintained, and he looked at Uchiha Madara angrily. I really came here with sincerity. I don't think you were funny. Rose's voice was several degrees colder. I didn't ask you to come here. Haven't you figured out the current situation? You asked me, Uchiha Madara said coldly. I really want to cooperate with you now, don't force me to do it. He almost understood Uchiha Madara's attitude and Ross's attitude, and his voice suddenly became cold. In fact, Ross's obvious attitude is a threat, but to be honest, Uchiha Madara was not frightened, and he didn't take Ross seriously at all. Then I'll wait and see if you're better or I'm better, Uchiha Madara said calmly. Faced with such an uncooperative attitude with Zeboman, Ross was also angry, reached out and patted a few times, and then Uchiha Madara heard very uniform footsteps. The restaurant had been cleared a long time ago, but now the door was opened and more than a dozen men in black came in, each with a weapon in his hand. After these people came in, they surrounded the table Uchiha Madara and Ross without saying a word, and all weapons pointed at Uchiha Madara. This is in the city center, and being able to bring so many people with weapons in their hands shows that Ross is still very powerful. But Uchiha Madara didn't expect that Ross actually used such a rude and simple method, and couldn't help rolling his eyes. Now I think you should wake up and tell me your answer, Ross said calmly, feeling that he was about to succeed. Facing the confident Ross, a slight smile appeared on the corner of Uchiha Madara's mouth, and then these black people only saw something flashing in front of their eyes. When the men in black opened their eyes again, they found that their master had been strangled by Uchiha Madara's neck and pointed a gun at his head. That's my answer, I just don't know if you're satisfied, Uchiha Madara said in a very soft tone, but his hand became heavier and he pushed the gun forward. Don't look at how powerful Ross was before, but when his life was threatened, he was no different from the subordinates before him. Advertisement 0. For flowers. Rose's whole body was stiff, and he said in a trembling voice. Don't be angry, we have something to say, and we have something to say. Tell me well, I see that these people you brought don't seem to want to have a good talk with me? Uchiha Madara glanced at the men in black and said meaningfully. Because he didn't dare to lose his temper with Uchiha Madara, Ross vented all his anger on these men in black and scolded them directly. You bastards, don't put down your guns quickly, do you want me to die in front of you? Ross said in a very excited voice. Hearing this, the people in black hurriedly put down the weapons in their hands, and a slightly mocking smile appeared on Uchiha Madara's face. It's hard for you to come with me, don't worry, I won't kill you. Uchiha Madara leaned into Ross's ear and said in a very soft voice. But hearing this, Ross seemed to have heard a call from hell, and his eyes widened in horror. But Uchiha Madara didn't have time to pay attention to what Ross was thinking right now, he just grabbed Ross's neck and walked over to the parking garage. After getting into the car, Uchiha Madara tied Rose's hands and feet, and Luffy drove out. The men in black behind them were afraid that Uchiha Madara would do something to Ross, so they didn't dare to follow, so they could only watch Uchiha Madara leave. Then Uchiha Madara drove to the suburbs, found a deserted place, and threw Ross down. After a lot of glances around the desolate environment, the fear in Ross's eyes became more obvious, and there were some violent struggles. Don't worry, I said I won't kill you if I don't kill you. I'm a person who keeps my word. Uchiha Madara patted Rose's face and said calmly. Then, in Ross's somewhat frightened eyes, Uchiha Madara directly turned Ross's right hand behind him. Ross only felt a pain all over his body, and then he felt that his right hand was fluttering, and he couldn't use his strength at all. These waste your right hand, if there is another time. Uchiha Madara snorted coldly, and then threw Ross on the ground like throwing garbage. Chapter 264 Shield Help Advertisement Chapter 264 Shield Help. After solving Ross, Uchiha Madara went straight back to his car, ignoring Ross behind him. Now this is completely in the wilderness, and those black people will definitely be able to find Ross in the end, but Ross still has to suffer a lot. After returning to the villa, Tony saw the stinky expression on Uchiha Madara's face. So Tony didn't come to provoke Uchiha Madara, he just found a seat farther from Uchiha Madara and sat down, carefully looking at Uchiha Madara's face. Your steel suit is really popular, how do you solve it? Have you figured it out? Uchiha Madara asked angrily. After hearing Uchiha Madara's question, Tony's face also showed a helpless expression. He shrugged, 523, shoulders, and spread his hands to show that he had no clue. What's wrong? Someone troubled you again? Tony smiled slightly flatteringly and asked cautiously. What do you think? Hurry up and deal with these things, your movements are too slow. Uchiha Madara rolled his eyes and said impatiently. After all, this matter has nothing to do with Uchiha Madara to be honest, and Uchiha Madara has no particular idea about the technology of the steel suit. It was purely out of interest that I would develop it together with Tony, and what to do with the technology of this steel suit now is entirely up to Tony to decide. Uchiha Madara just didn't want anyone to bother him with this kind of thing, so Uchiha Madara kept urging Tony. Now it can be seen that Uchiha Madara is really annoying, so Tony quickly nodded towards Uchiha Madara and took over the matter. Don't worry, I will deal with this matter soon, Tony said very seriously. This is the best way, don't force me to shoot, I can't control it. Uchiha Madara threatened in a light tone. After this matter was left to Tony, Uchiha Madara stopped asking. Advertisement. I just hope in my heart that Tony can handle this matter as soon as possible, otherwise, when Uchiha Madara starts to make a move, it won't be enough to say a few words. It is indeed a bit troublesome to deal with this matter, so Uchiha Madara sees that Tony has left early and returned late these days, with a tired expression on his face. Before Tony brought back the good news, Uchiha Madara saw Coulson again in the villa. Is Mr. Stark not here? Coulson smiled at Uchiha Madara, and then asked with some curiosity. Jarvis, Tony didn't come back. Uchiha Madara didn't know where Tony was going, so he could only ask Jarvis a question. Mr. has gone out early in the morning, probably will be back for lunch. Jarvis's low Yuga voice appeared in the room. Hearing the news from Jarvis, a slightly disappointed expression appeared on Coulson's face. Did you have anything to do with Tony? Uchiha Madara asked Coulson casually after having someone bring him a cup of coffee. But this is a question that seems to make Coulson very embarrassed. Coulson hesitated for a while, and then showed an embarrassed smile at Uchiha Madara. In fact, there is nothing, just a little thing that needs Mr. Stark's help, Coulson said vaguely. Since Coulson didn't want to say more, Uchiha Madara naturally wouldn't press him, but the big news that happened recently kept popping up in his mind. But there has been nothing serious about the calm situation recently. The only serious thing should be the Hulk I mentioned earlier. According to the information collected by Zebo Madara, the Hulk is rough and fleshy, and ordinary weapons can't have any special impact on it at all. And the whereabouts of the Hulk are unpredictable, and it is indeed very difficult to catch the Hulk. But this kind of thing is generally in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D., so Uchiha Madara guessed that Coulson came to find Tony because he wanted Tony to help check this matter. It is best to catch the Hulk, after all, there is such a dangerous person outside, which is really scary. Advertisement. Is it about the Hulk? I've seen several such news. Uchiha Madara asked casually while eating breakfast. Probably didn't expect Uchiha Madara to know about this. Coulson first froze, and then looked at Uchiha Madara in surprise. The news has been reported several times. Do I know how surprised I am? Uchiha Madara said speechlessly. Now that Uchiha Madara already knew, Coulson no longer concealed it, and showed an embarrassed smile at Uchiha Madara. Because of this matter is relatively complicated, so we hope to get Mr. Stark's help. Coulson said very modestly. Then just wait here, and talk to Tony when he comes back, Uchiha Madara said to Coulson calmly. After that, Uchiha Madara was about to leave. After all, in Uchiha Madara's view, this matter had nothing to do with him at all. Wait, if you are willing to join us, we will be more sure. Coulson hesitated for a long time, but said it when Uchiha Madara got up and wanted to leave. Unexpectedly, Coulson still had such an idea. Uchiha couldn't help laughing, but after laughing, Uchiha Madara still shook his head at Coulson very firmly. I'm just an ordinary person, and I can't help you much. You should wait for Tony, Uchiha Madara said to Coulson. Then Uchiha Madara waved to Coulson and returned to his room. When Uchiha Madara went out again at lunchtime, he found that only 1.1 had Tony sitting in the restaurant alone, and Coulson had long since disappeared. Coulson is gone. You promised him? Uchiha Madara looked at the restaurant, and then asked curiously. How is that possible? I don't want to have anything to do with that Aegis level or something, Tony said very stubbornly. But Uchiha Madara knows Tony very well. Since Tony chose to announce his identity as Iron Man, it shows that Tony still has a sense of responsibility in his heart. Although Tony doesn't show it directly like Steve, but when something like this happens, Tony will definitely help. Really? Are you going to investigate this matter yourself? I don't believe you just stood by? Uchiha Madara asked with a raised eyebrow. Chapter 265 Private Investigation Advertisement. Chapter 265 Private Investigation. Uchiha Madara could see through his inner thoughts at a glance, and Tony's face also showed an embarrassed expression. But because Tony had dark skin, he couldn't tell that his face was turning red. But Tony is still very embarrassed, so he didn't admit it directly, but kept his mouth shut. What does this have to do with me? Why should I help them? Tony snorted, very sunere. How do I know why you are helping? It's your own idea, I'm not you. Uchiha Madara retorted as a matter of course. Isn't it useless to see them? Such simple things can't be done well, so... Tony kept speeding up his speech in a hurry. Alright, what you do is up to you, you can do as you like. Uchiha Madara didn't want to discuss it with Tony, so he nodded with a perfunctory expression. Faced with such a perfunctory attitude of Uchiha Madara, Tony pouted a little boringly, but he stopped talking. In the days that followed, Tony, as expected, studied the deeds of the Hulk, allowing Jarvis to find out a lot of information. Before 05, although Uchiha Madara rejected Coulson's request, when Tony brought a stack of documents to him, Uchiha Madara did not ignore Tony. Seeing Tony's pleading expression, Uchiha Madara sighed helplessly, and then picked up a few stacks of documents. Obviously this can't be born, it should have been acquired through transformation to cause such a situation, and it is irrational to transform into a Hulk. After reading some materials, Uchiha Madara almost figured out the situation. It is impossible to transform such a person without large-scale experimental equipment. Uchiha Madara quickly came to a conclusion. Tony also agrees very much with Uchiha Madara's conclusion, and since that's the case, the next step is clear. Understood, Jarvis, just follow this direction to collect information. Tony nodded towards Uchiha Madara and then instructed Jarvis. Advertisement: the Hulk thing has passed, but everyone still keeps in mind the terrifying situation in the school at that time, so no one relaxes their vigilance. Therefore, during this time, Uchiha Madara and Tony were quite quiet, and each department was busy searching for the Hulk, and no one had time to ask about the steel suit. It has to be said that Jarvis is a perfect assistant, and within a few days, he has put all the information of the Hulk in front of Uchiha Madara and Tony. After getting the information, Uchiha Madara also studied a lot, and then set his sights on a pizza restaurant. This is actually an ordinary pizza shop, but the owner of the shop seems to have an old acquaintance with the Hulk. So Uchiha Madara just told Tony to go to the pizza place and see if he could get any useful clues. Originally, Tony went out in high spirits, but when he came back, Tony was dejected, and it seemed that he didn't get any useful clues. The owner of the pizza shop directly denied that he knew the Hulk, and was reluctant to reveal Uchiha Madara anyway. Uchiha Madara also expected such a situation, so he was not angry. Then take a rest, I'll take you somewhere tomorrow. Uchiha Madara reached out and patted Tony's shoulder and said in a very calm tone. Next, no matter how Tony asked, Uchiha Madara was unwilling to reveal any more information. Because he trusted Uchiha Madara very much, Tony finally put away the troubled expression on his face, and went to rest obediently. The next day Uchiha Madara took Tony directly to a building and said, hopefully we're not too late, the 5th floor should have what we want, 99. But just as Uchiha Madara was about to take Tony up the elevator, he was suddenly stopped by the security guard. The security guard said that the 5th floor is now empty and there is nothing, so it is not allowed to go up. It's weird, why do people always want to go to the 5th floor? Uchiha Madara heard the security guard bow his head and complained in a very soft voice. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara's eyes suddenly became serious, and it seemed that someone had taken the lead, but no matter what, Uchiha Madara still went upstairs to find out. Advertisement. So Uchiha Madara turned his attention to Tony. After all, he was just an ordinary security guard, and Uchiha Madara didn't want to threaten such a person. All things that can be solved with money are not things at all, and there is obviously a better way to solve this problem. After seeing Uchiha Madara's eyes, Tony immediately understood what Uchiha Madara meant. Then Tony took out the phone in his hand and asked Jarvis to buy the whole building. Money is the best passport in the world, so Tony had it all done in minutes, and the building had completely changed hands. Tony is the owner of the building now, so the security guards can't stop him if he wants to go to the 5th floor. The security guard gave Uchiha Madara and Tony a pleasing smile, and then personally opened the elevator door and watched Uchiha Madara and Tony go in. The 5th floor was indeed silent, without anyone's voice, when Tony realized that Uchiha Madara had taken him to a laboratory. 527. But this laboratory will be abandoned for a long time tomorrow, and thick dust has accumulated on all kinds of experimental equipment. What is this place? What are we doing here? Tony asked in a curious tone, following behind Uchiha Madara. But now Uchiha Madara is not in the mood to pay attention to Tony, and just fixed his eyes on a very large cylindrical thing inside. Then Uchiha Madara walked to the thing in a few steps, and Tony quickly followed. But after seeing the manufacturer marked on the experimental equipment, Tony couldn't help but exclaimed. This instrument was actually made by the Stark Group. Uchiha Madara was not surprised because of this, but this thing Uchiha Madara had already seen. Uchiha Madara reached out and touched the name tag on it, then took a deep breath. Do you know what this is? Uchiha Madara asked with an almost sigh. Tony naturally shook his head in confusion, then looked at Uchiha Madara with curious eyes, hoping that Uchiha Madara could answer his doubts. You should have heard the story of the captain. The captain of the year was transformed with this thing. When Uchiha Madara spoke, his eyes were full of nostalgia. Chapter 266. Advertisement. Chapter 266. Although this equipment was manufactured by the Stark Group, and Howard was also involved in the serum project. But Tony wasn't even born at the time, so of course it wasn't clear about all this. Moreover, these things are considered relatively confidential things, and ordinary people have no chance to come into contact with them. Normally, this equipment should not appear in this place. Tony also showed a very surprised expression after hearing Uchiha Madara's words. He didn't expect that there is such a relationship. But doesn't it mean that after the captain's plan was successful, some accidents happened and the equipment was destroyed directly? Tony asked curiously. But because Uchiha Madara was still in Brooklyn when Steve accepted the serum program, he didn't officially enter the army. So I don't know much about the specific situation, or after reuniting with Steve later, Steve told Uchiha Madara himself. Therefore, after hearing Tony's question, Uchiha Madara's face flashed contemplation, thinking about this matter. There is no airtight wall in the world. There were many people present at the time, and it may have been leaked out, Uchiha Madara said with a cold face. There are some specific things that Uchiha Madara did not say directly, but it is very certain that after the success of the serum program, the people above want to vigorously promote it. I wanted to form a team of super warriors injected with serum, but because of the Hydra people who got into the scene at that time. Not only did he destroy the equipment, but he also stole the serum, which led to the direct disappearance of this plan. However, in order to hide the organization of Hydra, the prominent news was that a small accident occurred after the end of the experiment at that time, which caused the equipment to be destroyed directly. After so many years, after seeing this device Uchiha Madara, I don't know how to face it. Although many pictures from the past flashed through my heart, Uchiha quickly woke up and began to analyze the situation in front of him. To be able to get this equipment, it is obvious that the status is not low. After all, only high-level people are qualified to access this matter. Advertisement. Thinking about it this way, the scope of this person's identity is very narrow. After all, there are very few people who are qualified to come into contact with such confidential matters, and you only need to pay attention to these people. Destroy this, and then we'll go back first. Uchiha Madara glanced at Tony and said. But Tony seemed a little surprised by Uchiha Madara's decision, and glanced at Uchiha Madara in disbelief after hearing this. If you don't take this thing away, it will be destroyed directly? Tony couldn't help but ask with wide eyes. Uchiha Madara sneered and said, it's enough to have one captain in this world. I don't want anyone to take advantage of this thing. Well, trying to create the next captain. Although not very familiar with the situation in those years, Howard and Uchiha Madara, Steve and others are all good friends. Therefore, under the influence of Howard, Tony also knew the relationship between Uchiha Madara and Steve. So after hearing this, Tony immediately closed his mouth, then covered his left hand with a steel battlesuit and smashed the device directly. Although many useful clues were found this time, Uchiha Madara's face was not very good until he returned to the villa. Tony also knew that Uchiha Madara was in a bad mood, and he was not as cheap as before, but sat down a little farther away from Uchiha Madara, very well behaved. However, Uchiha Madara is really in a very bad mood now, not only because of the Hulk thing, but more because of the previous device. It is possible that the people who know this equipment, apart from the high-level people, should be the people of Hydra. But at that time, the old nest of the Hydra had been taken away by Uchiha Madara with Steve. Uchiha Madara did not believe that the Hydra had a chance to make a comeback. Sometimes the truth is in front of you, but you have to believe it. Although Uchiha Madara was very confident about his plan at the time, the slogan of Hydra has always been that it will grow back after cutting off a head. Therefore, the tenacious vitality of the Hydra, Uchiha Madara is not in the slightest doubt. As long as there is one fish that slips through the net, the Hydra can hide in the dark corners and rely on these sins in the dark world to nourish and strengthen itself. Advertisement. Thinking that the Hydra might resurface, Uchiha Madara's face became particularly gloomy, and he kept groping for his thumb, and a dangerous light flashed in his eyes. Uchiha Madara will never forget what Hydra did to Buggy. If Hydra comes back from the ashes, Uchiha Madara will be able to tackle them the first time, and naturally the second time. Compared with the Hulk, who is still not very clear about whether the enemy is a friend, it is obvious that the Hydra can occupy Uchiha Madara's mind more. Therefore, Uchiha Madara doesn't pay much attention to the Hulk these days, but suddenly one day, Tony brought a lot of reports to Uchiha Madara. After reading these reports, Uchiha Madara raised his eyebrows in surprise. Unexpectedly, the Hulk has actually returned here, and there seems to be a very fierce exchange of fire with the people in the army. And it was a coincidence that the students in the school took a clearer picture. The Hulk's figure was basically seen by everyone. Therefore, there are more and more rumors about this matter, and it is simply not under the control of the official patrol. Backquote. So what are you going to do? Tony, you have to understand that you are not the savior, it is not your responsibility. Uchiha Madara glanced at Tony and said very seriously. Li Jiao. Now Tony and before seemed to be caught in two extremes. Before Tony was a cynical playboy. But since seeing the chaos caused by the weapons made by his company, Tony has simply made it his duty to save the world. Seeing what Tony wanted to defend, Uchiha Madara hurriedly stopped Tony. It's not because of you that this is caused. Obviously, it's because of their greed. These people want to get power that doesn't belong to them. But although there is no more in-depth research, Uchiha Madara has almost figured out the current situation and pointed out the deepest problems. But those civilians should always be innocent, right? Tony said very insistently. Of course they are innocent, but now this incident doesn't pose any threat, does it? Uchiha Madara asked rhetorically. Chapter 267 Fury appears. Advertisement. Chapter 267 Fury appears. This question left Tony speechless, so Tony could only nod his head unwillingly. That's all right, other people will naturally investigate this matter. If he really threatens the lives of ordinary people, he can naturally go out to rescue them. Although Uchiha Madara's tone was as calm as ever, Tony gradually came to his senses after listening to it, and I have to say that this idea is very correct. So Tony shrugged helplessly and said, well, I'm being selfish, and I won't care about this in the future. After finally dispelling the enthusiasm that Tony didn't know when to ignite, Uchiha Madara was also relieved. Originally Uchiha Madara thought that as long as Tony gave up the idea of continuing to look for the Hulk, this matter should have nothing to do with him. But the leisurely days have not passed for a few days, and an uninvited guest came to the villa. It was a sunny afternoon, and Uchiha Madara was about to go surfing on the beach outside when she heard Jarvis' voice. Mr. Uchiha, Mr. is discussing with a Mr. Fury, do you want to go? Jarvis asked very politely. At first hearing this name, Uchiha Madara still thought that he had misheard 527. But when he came back to his senses, a slightly surprised expression appeared on Uchiha Madara's face. When did Fury come here? Uchiha Madara asked curiously. Although I don't spend many days with Fury, I still understand Fury's character Uchiha Madara very well. This is completely a person who goes to the Three Treasures Palace without incident, so if there is nothing special, it is impossible for Fury to go out in person. It didn't take long, maybe just 10 minutes, Jarvis replied. I won't go there. He's here to find Tony anyway, don't tell Tony I'm here. Uchiha Madara nodded, then instructed Jarvis. Advertisement. Although I don't know how Fury came here, Uchiha Madara didn't want to see Fury now, so he went back to his room directly. Not long after Uchiha Madara returned, a knock was heard at the door. Are there? Someone said they knew you and wanted to catch up with you. Tony's voice came from the door. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara sighed helplessly. AFBB. It seems that Fury has grown a lot over the years, and actually guessed the identity of Uchiha Madara. Now that Fury has discovered it, there is no need for Uchiha Madara to continue to hide. So Uchiha Madara went straight to the door and opened it. I was caught off guard when I saw Uchiha Madara appear in front of me. Although Fury had already guessed it, there was still a shocked expression on his face. Seeing Fury's expression, Uchiha Madara snorted and mocked. Didn't you already guess that I'm here? What else are you pretending to be? Fury was not angry at all for Uchiha Madara's taunting, but instead showed a smile to Uchiha Madara. It's just a guess, I didn't expect it to come true, long time no see, Fury said with a little emotion. Uchiha Madara didn't answer Fury's sentimental tone, but nodded to Fury indifferently. It's not good to be stuck here, let's go to the study if you have something to say, Uchiha Madara said lightly. Then Uchiha Madara took the lead, and Fury and Tony quickly followed. Don't you feel pleasantly surprised in the face of an old friend you haven't seen for so many years? This is too cold. Fury sat opposite Uchiha Madara and couldn't help complaining. I asked you to come here again. Uchiha Madara rolled her eyes at Fury and said in a very indifferent tone. Okay, it's not my fault, I really didn't investigate you. Facing Uchiha Madara's cold and indifferent attitude, Fury finally couldn't help it and explained. I just saw a news with you and Tony in it, so I found out about this. What Fury said was very sincere, for fear that Uchiha Madara would not believe it, but Uchiha Madara didn't really mean to be angry at first. Advertisement. After hearing Fury's explanation, he just snorted coldly and then quickly skipped the topic. Don't talk about these things. How come you have become a one-eyed dragon after not seeing you for so many years? Uchiha Madara's tone softened a lot. What else could it be because of something? Isn't it the Kree incident back then? That's what happened in the back anyway, Fury said indifferently. It seems that you have been doing well these years. I heard Coulson say that you have become the director, Uchiha Madara said in a teasing tone. Facing Uchiha Madara's ridicule, Fury showed a very modest smile, waved his hand and said, it's nothing, it's just a matter of qualifications. While Uchiha Madara was chatting with Fury, Tony's face Jonin couldn't help showing a very surprised expression. Tony couldn't understand how Uchiha Madara was related to Fury. But this matter is also very complicated, so Uchiha Madara didn't bother to explain and left Tony to guess. After some chatter, Uchiha Madara quickly got to the point. Fury obviously understands Uchiha Madara's temper, so if it's not something important, he shouldn't take the initiative to disturb Uchiha Madara. You're so busy right now that you won't come here. If you have something, just say it directly and don't be around the corner, Uchiha Madara asked very bluntly. His purpose was seen through by Uchiha Madara at a glance, but Fury was not surprised at all, and instead showed a smile to Uchiha Madara. You still know me as always, there is indeed a little thing, Fury said without embarrassment at all. Uchiha Madara had already received Fury's cheeky face, so after hearing this answer, he just nodded towards Fury, indicating that he had something to say. I told you before that I wanted to form a team with magical abilities, Fury said, looking at Uchiha Madara. Naturally, Uchiha Madara knew about this. At that time, the name was still Uchiha Madara, so Uchiha Madara nodded. So, you don't mean to invite me, do you? You know it's impossible, Uchiha Madara said very bluntly without waiting for Fury to speak. Fury is also familiar with Uchiha Madara's character, so Fury is not surprised at all in the face of Uchiha Madara's rejection. Chapter 268 Advertisement. Chapter 268 Although not surprised by Uchiha Madara's rejection, Fury's face inevitably showed a slightly disappointed expression. Of course I know, but I didn't expect that after so many years, you still haven't changed, Fury said with a little regret. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara smiled unconsciously and replied, I don't have any problems, naturally I don't need to change. Facing the very firm Uchiha Madara in his heart, it was obvious that Fury had no choice but to give up the idea. I will naturally respect your choice. In fact, this time I came here mainly for Mr. Stark. Fury finally told the truth at this time. Uchiha Madara is not surprised by this result. Obviously, Uchiha Madara will not be persuaded anyway, so Fury can only work in other directions. So, have you succeeded? Tony is not as persuasive as you think, Uchiha Madara asked with some schadenfreude. Sure enough, it was guessed by Uchiha Madara, and the expression on Fury's face suddenly collapsed, revealing a slightly embarrassed expression. As expected, he is someone who can chat with you, he is indeed stubborn enough. Fury's tone was full of exhaustion. But hearing this, Uchiha Madara laughed mercilessly, and knew that Fury didn't succeed. Although Uchiha Madara's merciless ridicule made Fury feel very embarrassed, the law could only sit aside without temper. After Uchiha Madara finally laughed enough, Fury got to the point. In the end, it was Uchiha Madara's help. I think you should know that this plan has always been my hard work. From the moment I met you, I wanted to complete this plan. When he said these words, Fury kept looking into Uchiha Madara's eyes, and his tone was very sincere. Although Fury does not look like a good person, Uchiha Madara knows this. Fury really wants to organize such a team, to protect the peace of the earth. Advertisement. So Uchiha Madara also restrained the casual smile on his face, and listened to Fury's story very seriously. So you haven't found any suitable candidates for so many years? Uchiha Madara's question was not malicious at all, just curious. Hearing this question, Fury of course shook his head and explained, of course not, there are some agents from our own side to join. Uchiha Madara nodded knowingly, and then stopped asking questions, but Uchiha Madara didn't speak, but Fury opened the chat box. But how powerful the agents are, they are still ordinary people. But the people who are eyeing the earth are far from only the people of the earth. Fury's tone is full of helplessness. Knowing that what Fury said was true, Uchiha Madara was not angry, but just stared at Fury. It was probably too long since no one could talk to him, so Fury just opened the chatterbox and started talking to Uchiha Madara about his hardships over the years. We need to use the power of transcendence, so I really hope that Tony can join in. Fury will be very sincere in these words. Uchiha Madara also knows that Fury is probably really out of options now, and desperately hopes to absorb different powers. But although it sounds very simple, it still depends on Tony's own wishes, and Uchiha Madara doesn't want to interfere in other people's lives. But Fury's eyes were too sincere. Although Uchiha Madara doesn't have Fury's worldwide awareness, it doesn't stop others from taking such revenge. So after pondering for a moment, Uchiha Madara nodded at Fury. After seeing Uchiha Madara's actions, Fred's eyes suddenly lit up, and the whole person felt different, as if he got the best thing in the world. But Uchiha Madara didn't mean to persuade Tony, just willing to say a few good words for Fury. In order to prevent Fury from misunderstanding what he meant, Uchiha Madara put the ugly words first. I'll make it clear to you that I'm not trying to help you persuade Tony, I'm just willing to help you with a few good words. Uchiha Madara said very seriously. Advertisement. Because he knew Uchiha Madara's character, Fury was not misunderstood at the time, and it was enough for Fury to be happy. 0. For flowers. After all, with a temperament like Tony, others may not hear what others say, but if Uchiha Madara speaks, then everything will be different. So Fury nodded hurriedly and said to Uchiha Madara, of course I know that, and it's enough to let Tony understand us. Fury has always acted with ease, but now he is so excited, it seems that Tony really made Fury feel ashamed. After chatting, Uchiha Madara sent Fury out, and then went to find Tony. I'm quite surprised that you guys actually know each other. After seeing Uchiha Madara appear, Tony said with some yin and yang. See Tony's expression. Uchiha Madara knew that Tony must have misunderstood. I don't know what happened during this time. Uchiha Madara only felt that Tony's character became more and more sharp, and a little thing could irritate Tony. I met many years ago because of an accident, and I haven't seen each other for many years. Uchiha Madara explained calmly. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, the expression on Tony's face obviously eased a lot, and now he understands that he has misunderstood Uchiha Madara. But Tony was embarrassed and apologized frankly, but he poured a cup of coffee awkwardly and handed it to Uchiha Madara. What did he tell you? Did he invite you to join that Avenger? Tony asked curiously. The name is still what I helped him think of at the beginning, so of course I won't join, but you can consider it. Uchiha Madara said lightly. Because Uchiha Madara's tone was too bland, it didn't make Tony rebellious, but Tony became more curious about this matter. I know you always want to do something within your power, and this is indeed a good place, Uchiha Madara said patiently. Then Uchiha Madara briefly introduced Tony to the team that Fury wanted to organize. If you are interested, I can talk to Fury and leave you with greater freedom, Uchiha Madara assured Dao Bi. Chapter 269 Tony Helps Advertisement. Chapter 269 Tony Helps. Uchiha Madara's remarks spoke to Tony's heart, and it was this thing that Tony had been more embarrassed about. Obviously Tony's character is relatively undisciplined, so he has always been reluctant to join this organization. Now that he was assured by Uchiha Madara, Tony fell into deep thought, and began to work hard and seriously think about the feasibility of this matter. Seeing that Tony had fallen into contemplation, Uchiha Madara did not disturb Tony, but gave Tony enough time to think. This matter is really important, so I have to think about it again. After thinking about it, Tony looked at Uchiha Madara and explained. Seeing that Tony already had his own thoughts, Uchiha Madara would not interfere too much, but just nodded at Tony. Then you can think about, May 27th, yourself, and if you have any ideas, just talk to Fury, Uchiha Madara said in a very calm tone. The days went on like this calmly. Uchiha Madara had nothing particularly important before, and the days were very leisurely. On the contrary, although Tony left all the affairs of the group to Miss Potts because of Fury's invitation, Tony has been frowning these days. I haven't waited for Tony to come up with a reason, it's not very peaceful there. Originally, everyone was very concerned about the Hulk, but as the Hulk gradually disappeared, the people naturally returned to their lives. But I don't know which idiot gave the order, which angered the Hulk, and immediately started working with the Hulk in the urban area. And also sent several military planes to kill the Hulk. It was always sunny and bright, and there were already many people in the downtown area. Many innocent people were implicated, and the casualties were very heavy. Immediately afterwards, the Hulk ran to the suburbs and military planes followed. This time, the incident is really too big, and it is impossible to hide it. Everyone is paying attention to this matter. Advertisement. But even so, those who sent out failed to catch the Hulk, but although the Hulk escaped, this completely angered the anger of the people. Before the people who gave the order had any response, these people took to the streets and started to demonstrate and protest. After all, in the eyes of the public, although the Hulk looked very scary before, he didn't see anything excessive. On the contrary, it was the hands that moved first, and those who flirted first were cheap. It was because they took the lead in angering the Hulk that caused their own side to suffer very heavy casualties. This matter was so turbulent that it couldn't be suppressed at all, and Fury was also worried about losing his hair these days. After all, S.H.I.E.L.D. was originally in charge of this matter. Although the order was not given by Fury, Fury was indeed under pressure from all parties. It's not that Fury didn't work hard, he has sent a lot of agents to go, but it has no effect at all. Not only did the people on his side only hold back, but the Hulk didn't trust humans very much, as long as a stranger approached. The Hulk will completely anger the Hulk. Originally, the Hulk had no sense, and once a stranger approached, he would frantically destroy the surrounding things. These narcotics have absolutely no effect on the Hulk, so Fury is really desperate, and he can only come to Uchiha Madara again for help. I really can't help it. I can't trouble Carol because of such a trivial matter. Fury's eyes were full of helplessness. To be honest, Furui has already put his posture so low, and Uchiha Madara is indeed a little unbearable. But no matter what, Uchiha Madara didn't want to reveal his identity, and naturally he didn't want to do it himself, so Uchiha Madara called Tony over. Let Tony take a look for you, it's not convenient for me to show up right now. Uchiha Madara explained with a slight sigh. Then Uchiha Madara briefly talked about the current situation, because he knew that Tony still had some concerns in his heart, so Uchiha Madara also spoke very clearly. You don't have to be burdened, this time it's just a favor, it doesn't mean that you will join the Avengers if you help. Uchiha Madara said very bluntly. After hearing Uchiha Madara's explanation, Tony finally breathed a sigh of relief. Advertisement and Tony himself was very interested in the Hulk thing, so he agreed very readily. Probably this time things were just a little trickier. Tony had been out for 3 or 4 days before he came back in a dusty way, but the expression on his face could not be called pleasant. He was too defensive, and he couldn't say anything at all. We had a fight. Tony pretended to be relaxed. Although Tony's tone was very relaxed, when Tony took off his steel suit, he could see that the wound on Tony's face was very obvious. But Tony didn't want to say it himself, and Uchiha Madara naturally wouldn't hold on to this matter, just pretending that he didn't see anything. To know such a proud man like Tony, he had never experienced failure before, and this time the action was not successful. Tony was in a bad mood. Tony, who has been getting more and more irritable during this time, is more prone to anger now, but he has a little control in front of Uchiha Madara. And now there is still bad news, a Hulk is enough to give Tony a headache. Now I don't know where a monster that looks similar to the Hulk appeared, but this monster is much uglier than the Hulk, and the bones have been exposed. However, this new monster is very different from the Hulk. The Hulk can usually maintain his human form, and will only turn into a Hulk after being provoked, and he is completely irrational after being transformed into a Hulk. But this monster 1.1 can't change back to human appearance at all, but it retains human rationality. Then a brand new species obviously cannot be born out of nowhere, and someone must have done something wrong. So you think this is supposed to be the product of a laboratory? Fury asked, looking at Uchiha Madara. Isn't it obvious? Uchiha Madara replied with some speechlessness. What about the Hulk? Did he also have a laboratory? Fury didn't seem to find everything about the Hulk, so there were still some doubts. Originally, Uchiha Madara thought that S.H.I.E.L.D. was almost omnipotent, but did not expect that she would let Jarvis check things, and S.H.I.E.L.D. did not receive any news. This made Uchiha Madara a little surprised, so Uchiha Madara looked at Fury a little strangely. Chapter 270 Association Advertisement Chapter 270 Association. After understanding Uchiha Madara's eyes, Fury wiped his face weakly and showed a bitter smile towards Uchiha Madara. I will tell you the truth with you. In fact, S.H.I.E.L.D. is far less powerful than you think. Fury admitted with some helplessness. You must know that Fury regards S.H.I.E.L.D. as more important than his own life. To allow Fury to say such a thing can only prove that the situation of S.H.I.E.L.D. should be really bad. And in the face of such a situation, the comfort of words is obviously weak. Simply Uchiha Madara closed his mouth and just sat very quietly next to Fury, quietly listening to Fury's distress. Those stupid idiots only think about fighting for power and profit all day long. S.H.I.E.L.D. is in internal and external trouble right now, Fury said through gritted teeth. Obviously, he hated the idiot in his mouth. Although Fury didn't make the words too clear, Uchiha Madara immediately understood the situation in front of him. Probably other people feel that the power of S.H.I.E.L.D. is too great, and they are afraid of threatening their own status. After all, S.H.I.E.L.D. is responsible for these bizarre things. In the eyes of ordinary people, S.H.I.E.L.D. can control supernatural abilities, and it is difficult to guarantee that one day S.H.I.E.L.D. This is almost the same situation that Uchiha Madara faced back then. Everyone knows that Uchiha Madara is the strongest one. But this is because Uchiha Madara is too strong, and he is not a pure-blooded Chinese, so the upper-class people are always wary of Uchiha Madara. Only then did a Captain America come out, hoping the spiritual leader would rival Uchiha Madara. It's just that those who are sitting in high positions are more excessive than before. At the time of Uchiha Madara, these people took into account the strength of Uchiha Madara. So I don't dare to do anything to Uchiha Madara. I just want to introduce a person who can share the prestige and power in the hands of Uchiha Madara. But now these people are preventing S.H.I.E.L.D. while letting S.H.I.E.L.D. investigate this matter when the Hulk appears. It's a ridiculous thing. Uchiha Madara almost laughed when he heard it. I don't know how these people are still alive. Advertisement. After telling Uchiha Madara about his suffering for so many years, Fury was also relieved, with a relieved smile on his face. In fact, we have been investigating the Hulk thing all the time, but all the clues were broken after we found it. From then on, I knew something was wrong, Fury said angrily. Now that Fury has spoken out about such humiliating things, Uchiha Madara also knows that Fury is really sincere this time. Therefore, Uchiha Madara didn't take Joe anymore, but helped Fury analyze this matter seriously. The position of the person who can hide this must be very high. Who do you think is more likely? Uchiha Madara asked curiously. After all, Fury is the one who knows the colleagues around him the most, and Uchiha Madara also wants to get a general range, so it will be easier to check later. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Fury also thought about this issue very seriously, but the scope was too broad, so Fury could not finalize it. But what can be more certain? It should be done by people in the military. At first Uchiha Madara didn't speak, just listened to Fury very quietly. But listening to Uchiha Madara suddenly remembered something. The identity of Ross, who I saw before, is still unknown. Although, after returning, Uchiha Madara asked Jarvis to check Rose's identity. But later, because there were a lot of things, and Uchiha Madara didn't take Luo to heart, he naturally forgot about it. If Ross was just an ordinary rich man, he would definitely not dare to contain Uchiha Madara. So thinking about it this way, Uchiha Madara also guessed that Ross's identity is not simple, and Uchiha Madara always feels that there is some connection between these two things. So Uchiha Madara suddenly stood up from the sofa and said to Jarvis, "Jarvis, is the Ross information that I asked you to check last time still available?" "I'd love to serve you, sir. I'll call up the data now." Jarvis's sweet voice came out. Then Uchiha Madara saw all the information of Ross projected on the screen in front. Advertisement. Seeing that Uchiha Madara was looking at the information very seriously, Fury also came over and immediately saw the photo above. "Isn't this General Thunderbolt? You know him?" Fury's tone was full of curiosity. "Have seen him before. Do you know him?" Uchiha Madara raised his eyebrows after hearing this, and then asked calmly. Fury curled his lips in disdain before replying, "Of course I know him, a stubborn old man, 35. It seems that for this Thunder General, Fury is not very appreciative. Uchiha Madara also saw more important information at this time, and his eyes were fixed on it at once. According to the information obtained by Uchiha Madara before, the Hulk has a girlfriend. But Uchiha Madara is now on Ross's profile and sees that the Hulk's girlfriend is actually Ross's daughter. There cannot be such a coincidence in the world, and there must be some connection between all this. 527. Jarvis, help me check the news about Rose's daughter. Uchiha Madara frowned and ordered. Jarvis is simply the most reliable intelligence collector, and quickly put the information of the Hulk's girlfriend in front of Uchiha Madara. The Hulk's girlfriend is actually a biology professor at Carver University. You must know that the first time the Hulk appeared in everyone's sight was on the Carver campus. It all happened so coincidentally that Uchiha Madara prefers to call it premeditated rather than accidental. Fury is naturally not a fool, but his actions have been blocked before, so Fury cannot collect useful information. Now that Uchiha Madara has all the useful information in front of him, Fury naturally understands the connection immediately. "Damn, how could he do such a thing? He's just crazy," Fury said with some anger. In fact, Uchiha Madara is not sure whether this matter is the mastermind of Ross, but one thing is certain, Ross is very eager to get the power of the Hulk. "I think you have to act quickly. If he is really the mastermind, he can create a Hulk, and naturally he can also create a second and a third," Uchiha Madara pointedly said. Chapter 271 Hulk Battle Advertisement. Chapter 271 Hulk Battle. Listening to Uchiha Madara's words, Fury naturally remembered another rational green-skinned monster that appeared during this time. It is really terrifying. If the Screw really masters this technology and keeps creating this green-skinned monster, what the next world will be like is unimaginable. After all, when Ross does such a thing, it may always be just to satisfy his own curiosity. It can be seen that Ross is a very ambitious person. Thinking of the chaos that may be faced next, Fury's face suddenly gloomy, and the surrounding air pressure is also very low. Although he doesn't look like a good person, it has to be said that Fury is actually a very kind person. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became, so soon Fury stood up and said goodbye to Uchiha Madara, saying that he was going to solve this matter. Although it belongs to different departments, it is also an internal matter, and Uchiha Madara will not be involved in the past. Uchiha Madara was not idle when Fury went back to investigate Ross. Now that everyone has been involved in this matter, there is no difference between doing more and doing less, so Uchiha Madara is going to send the Buddha to the west. Now this society is very transparent, many people will unconsciously leave their information on the internet. So Jarvis can play a very big role at this time. If it is in the game, Jarvis is simply that plug-in. According to some information obtained by Jarvis hacking the internet, Uchiha Madara found out that the Hulk had returned here with his girlfriend, and had a relationship with another professor. This professor also mainly studies biology, and it is obvious what the Hulk wants to do. After all, no one wants to be a scary monster. After figuring this out, the next step is much more convenient, just go to the professor. If the Hulk really wants to become a normal person, he must go through some research, so he cannot leave in a short time. When Uchiha Madara was about to take Tony to a meeting with the professor, Fury walked in angrily, and after seeing Uchiha Madara, he managed to control his emotions. Advertisement, what happened? Why are you so angry? Uchiha Madara's tone was as flat as ever. But this calm tone made Fury calm down all of a sudden. It's not because of the Hulk thing. I've already confirmed it. Sure enough, Ross did it. When Fury spoke, there was still anger in his eyes. This time Fury's negotiation was very unsuccessful, and even if Ross admitted that he did it, he had no regrets at all. If this is the only case, it is not enough to make Fury make such a big fire, and what makes Fury feel even more chilling is that everyone is well aware of this matter. But no one stood up to stop it. For their own so-called interests, everyone acquiesced in this experiment. Although the experiment was a failure, no one was willing to stand up and bear the consequences of the failure of the experiment, and everyone stood on the sidelines. As soon as he talked about this matter, Fury couldn't control the anger on his face, and the more he talked, the more angry he became. Seeing Fury's miraculous appearance, Uchiha Madara was really afraid that Fury couldn't control it for a while and directly fainted. So Uchiha Madara quickly changed the subject and talked about his latest discovery. Things have already happened, and now the more important thing is the latter. There is Mr. Lan, he may have mastered this technology. Uchiha Madara said very seriously. Hearing such an important matter, Fury naturally couldn't care less about being angry, and hurriedly asked Uchiha Madara about the situation. After briefly talking to Fury about the situation, Uchiha Madara was ready to take Fury over to take a look. When Uchiha Madara arrived with Fury and Tony, he found that Mr. Lan's laboratory was already in a mess, and Mr. Lan fell to the ground covered in blood and lost his pulse. Damn, we're a step late, Fury couldn't help but cursed in a low voice. Uchiha Madara carefully inspected the situation in the laboratory, and found that the experimental equipment seemed to have been activated, indicating that someone had accepted the experiment. Then, before Uchiha Madara could analyze the matter carefully, there was a very loud noise from the street outside, and a mix of explosions and cries could be heard. Advertisement. Hearing this voice, Uchiha Madara and Tony looked at each other, and the two immediately ran towards the outside. Fury is just an ordinary person after all, so the action is definitely not comparable to Uchiha Madara and Tony. When Uchiha Madara and Tony rushed outside at the fastest speed, they found that the place a few blocks away had turned into a hell. There were obviously two Hulks on the street. One of them was very ugly. His bones were exposed, his eyes were red, and he was completely irrational. The ugly Hulk attacked the other Hulk and kept smashing the vehicles on the road. As for the normal-looking Hulk, it seems to be protecting other people on the street, so he is fighting the ugly green-skinned monster. Seeing this scene, Tony naturally wanted to join in, but was stopped by Uchiha Madara. Backquote. Now is not the time for you to pass, he can deal with it himself, Uchiha Madara said in a very calm tone. Tony, who was originally hot-blooded, was like being poured into a basin of cold water, and immediately woke up. Although Tony wanted to help these people very much, Tony also knew very well that if he appeared here now, what he was waiting for was endless trouble. Li Hao. So in the end Tony listened to Uchiha Madara's advice and found a relatively hidden corner with a very good perspective to hide himself. Wait, if he really can't defeat that green-skinned monster, you go out. Uchiha Madara looked at Tony and said seriously. The two Hulks fought so hard that they couldn't tell the difference for a while. While everyone was watching this scene with their breath, the green-skinned monster suddenly jumped up and grabbed a low-flying plane. Seeing that the military plane was about to be pulled down, the Hulk rushed up and hugged the green monster. The two Hulks directly transferred the battlefield to the air, which is fine, so as not to hurt innocent people below. Obviously, the pilot of the military plane thought so too, and soon drove the plane towards the suburbs. Chapter 272 Hulk Wins. Advertisement. Chapter 272 Hulk Wins. Seeing this scene, Uchiha Madara naturally followed. After all, under the competition of the two Hulks, the military plane was really shaky. But fortunately, the quality of this military aircraft was decent, and there was no accident in the middle, but it steadily brought the two Hulks to the suburbs. Then the Hulk tore off the green-skinned monster, and the two began to fight on the open plain. The size of the green monster is much larger than that of the Hulk Bruce, and his movements are also quite ferocious, so at the beginning, Bruce was at a disadvantage. But Bruce's eyes were very firm this time. He didn't seem to have lost his mind completely, he seemed to have something he wanted to protect. Therefore, although he kept being knocked down to the ground, Bruce got up again and kept launching counterattacks against the green monsters. Bruce and the green-skinned monster were completely close to hand-to-hand combat, punching each other with punch and punch, and a very intense fight could be heard from a distance. And this scene was too tragic. Uchiha Madara and Tony both couldn't bear to leave their eyes. When exactly do we have to shoot? Tony asked anxiously. Although Uchiha Madara also felt that Bruce was suppressed a bit miserably, but Uchiha Madara was optimistic that Bruce could win in the end, so he was not in a hurry to go out. Don't worry, he can defeat that green monster himself, Uchiha Madara replied in a very confident tone. Although I don't know where Uchiha Madara's judgment came from, Tony still trusts Uchiha Madara very much. Now that Uchiha Madara has spoken, Tony stayed beside Uchiha Madara. Although the person is here, Tony's heart has long drifted past, staring intently at the fierce fight on the other side, for fear of any accident. However, Bruce did not disappoint Uchiha Madara. Sometimes belief can really support people to walk out of a road to the sky. Advertisement. Although Bruce had the upper hand at first, but because of Bruce's perseverance, he finally knocked the green-skinned monster to the ground. Taking this opportunity, Bruce rushed forward quickly, pinched the neck of the green-skinned monster with his hands, and punched the green-skinned monster's chest one by one. At first, the green-skinned monster was still struggling very fiercely, but gradually there was no movement. Then Bruce also stood up from the green-skinned monster and turned to look at the military plane that had been forced to land. Just then, a woman suddenly appeared on the plane and shouted at Bruce, "Be careful behind you." It turned out that the green-skinned monster had stood up at some point and was holding a very thick iron chain and began to smash things frantically. "General, do you have any last words?" At this time, the green-skinned monster also recovered a little bit of reason and shouted towards the people on the plane while smashing the military plane. Uchiha Madara took a closer look and found that it was Ross who got on and off the plane. Sure enough, Ross did this, and now he has to swallow the bitter fruit himself. Although there was a hint from his girlfriend, Bruce still did not react immediately and was hit by the chain and fell to the ground. The green-skinned monster also took this opportunity to increase the intensity of its attack, and wanted to take the opportunity to deal with Bruce and General Ross. But Bruce's reaction was also very fast, and he quickly turned his hand and grabbed the chain back, and then tied it around the neck of the green-skinned monster. Just when Bruce stepped up his efforts and wanted to take the opportunity to add the green-skinned monster to strangle to death, the woman suddenly walked in front of Bruce. "Stop!" yelled at the woman. I don't know what happened, but the Hulk who had lost his mind suddenly woke up and put down the chain in his hand. Then the woman walked up to Bruce, looked at Bruce with teary eyes, and said softly, "AFBB, it's all right." Bruce stretched out one of his index fingers, touched the woman's face carefully, and then called out in a very thick voice, "Betty." Advertisement. This was supposed to be a very moving picture, but after seeing it, Uchiha Madara and Tony both had disgusted expressions on their faces. "If you don't remove the roots, sooner or later they will regret it," Uchiha Madara sneered and said with a little disdain. Although this common saying is not very clear, Tony agrees very much with Chiba Madara's statement. After all, it is only a cross area not so far from the city, so the people in the army quickly surrounded it with guns. The surrounding residents also covered their mouths, watching the scene in disbelief. The people next to Ross had already pointed their guns at Bruce, but Bruce saved his life, so Ross stopped the actions of the people around him. Although Bruce looks like a Hulk now, he is still a bit sensible, and he knows that this is not the place for him to stay, and quickly disappears in front of everyone by jumping. Uchiha Madara was not at all interested in the mess on Ross's side, so he grabbed Tony and followed the Hulk's pace. There was originally a small helicopter following the Hulk's head, but the fuel of the small helicopter was obviously not enough to support it to fly so far. In the end, the Hulk finally managed to throw off the helicopter and ran to a very remote place. He was probably exhausted, so the Hulk quickly fell to the ground. The Hulk's body and the speed visible to the naked eye shrank, and finally turned into a normal person. Uchiha Madara took Tony to the Hulk's side. But Bruce really didn't have any strength. Uchiha Madara asked Tony to help Bruce up, but he didn't wake him up. You must know that those people probably haven't given up the idea of hunting Bruce, so Uchiha Madara and Tony took Bruce to a villa that he didn't usually live in. After waking up, Bruce looked at his surroundings with some panic, then looked at Uchiha Madara and Tony with a wary face. "Relax, we didn't mean anything, we just picked up a poor guy on the beach," Uchiha Madara explained to Bruce with a reassuring smile. Probably because his own affairs were too complicated, so Bruce didn't have time to pay attention to the news and couldn't recognize Tony as the famous Iron Man. So after hearing Uchiha Madara's explanation, Bruce showed a grateful smile instead. Chapter 273 Getting to Know Advertisement. Chapter 273 Getting to Know. Bruce knew from this look that he must have misunderstood, and Uchiha Madara didn't want to hide anything from Bruce. However, because there is still a Hulk living in his body, it can be known from the information found before that Bruce is a very sensitive person. If Uchiha Madara and Tony have directly stated their identities at the beginning, they may scare Bruce, and it is very likely that Bruce will do something else without notice. "Is there any discomfort? We just gave you some medicine and didn't ask the doctor to come," Uchiha Madara asked. Hearing that Uchiha Madara didn't call the doctor over, Bruce relaxed and the expression on his face was much more relaxed. "I have nothing to do, don't bother the doctor, my name is Bruce Banner, you can call me Bruce," Bruce said very gently. As long as he doesn't provoke Bruce and doesn't let the Hulk appear in Bruce's body, Bruce looks like a gentle and harmless scholar professor. Although Bruce was so sincere, Uchiha Madara and Tony didn't play any tricks and both introduced themselves to Bruce. After hearing Tony's name, a confused expression flashed on Bruce's face, but he had been away from here for a long time, so Bruce didn't think deeply. "What's your plan next? If you need our help, you can say it directly, it's fine." Uchiha Madara looked at Bruce meaningfully and asked. "I don't know, let's take a step by step, thank you for your concern," Bruce replied very gently, without any doubt. Seeing Bruce who had no doubts, Uchiha Madara felt a little helpless, and he hinted so clearly. "Tony and I have seen it all, so you can really speak up if you're in a dilemma." Uchiha Madara just laid it all out. When he first heard this, Bruce first froze, and then his hands couldn't help clenching into fists. Seeing this scene, Uchiha Madara quickly reached out and patted Bruce on the shoulder to stabilize Bruce's emotions. "Relax, we don't have any malicious intentions, otherwise we won't be willing to save you after seeing all that," Tony also explained quickly. Advertisement. Originally, the skin on his hands had gradually emerged green. Bruce, he finally calmed down, and then looked at Uchiha Madara and Tony a little strangely. "Why save me? Aren't you afraid? I'm a monster," Bruce asked while suppressing his voice. "Then did you do anything unforgivable?" Uchiha Madara asked in a speechless tone. Bruce was stunned when he heard this, and then shook his head blankly. "That's okay, since you haven't done anything unforgivable, just because you don't look like us," Uchiha Madara said rightfully. For Uchiha Madara, it's just ordinary words, because that's what Uchiha Madara thinks in his heart. But Bruce had tears in his eyes after hearing this, and looked at Uchiha Madara with a moved face. In fact, Bruce's is also very simple, just hope that everyone can see themselves with the eyes of ordinary people. Not expecting to hear such words in Uchiha Madara's mouth, the vigilance in Bruce's eyes gradually subsided. What happened to cause this phenomenon? Is it really Ross's hand? Seeing Bruce's mood gradually stabilized, Tony couldn't help but ask. This matter is quite complicated. If you don't mind, I can start from the beginning. Bruce sighed softly and said very gently. This matter is also very complicated. In short, the cells in Brooke's body were damaged by gamma rays. As long as he is provoked, Bruce will not be able to control himself, the cells in the body will change, and then he will become an irrational Hulk. When Bruce first transformed, he was discovered by his girlfriend and then by Ross, who wanted to have Bruce's ability to arm the army. Therefore, Ross always wanted to capture Bruce for experiments, but Bruce hated the Hulk in his body and wanted to completely eliminate the Hulk. Then Bruce fled to other countries, but Bruce met Mr. Lan on the forum, and Mr. Lan seemed to have a solution to this matter. So Bruce ventured back here, and Uchiha Madara and Tony basically knew what happened next. 0. For flowers. Advertisement, Mr. Lan is dead, what are you going to do next? You can go to Mr. Lan and get the information back. 35 Uchiha Madara said with a frown. Hearing this, Bruce had a wry smile on his face, and then shook his head slightly. We've already tried it once, but it obviously didn't work, and the other Hulk before that probably used something from Mr. Lan. That's for sure. When Uchiha Madara arrived at the lab, the equipment was all on, and many of the medicines were missing. But fortunately, Uchiha Madara kept an eye on it and took out all the useful information in the laboratory and the USB flash drive, leaving nothing for Ross. 0 Anyway, these materials were left in the hands of Uchiha Madara and had no effect, so Uchiha Madara directly handed them over to Bruce. Take this information, maybe it's useful, it's just a pile of waste paper in our hands, Uchiha Madara said calmly. After receiving this little information, the emotion on Bruce's face was beyond words. Never thought that it was just a chance encounter, and Uchiha Madara was so friendly to him. Just as Uchiha Madara, Bruce and Tony were chatting happily, the phone rang suddenly, and Fury's name jumped on the screen. After picking up the phone, as expected, Fury asked about Bruce's situation. But after Uchiha Madara saw Bruce lying peacefully on the bed, he chose to keep it a secret. Uchiha Madara just briefly talked about the situation last night, and finally said that Bruce ran away after everything was over, and no one knew where Bruce was. I don't know if Fury believed Uchiha Madara's statement. In short, this matter passed, and Fury did not continue to ask. Because the injury on Bruce's body has not yet healed, and not many people know about this villa, Uchiha Madara asked Bruce to stay here to recover from the injury. As for the follow-up place, we need Bruce to make arrangements after recovering from his injury. Chapter 274 Advertisement Chapter 274 The Hulk is simply invulnerable, although Bruce is an ordinary man. But thanks to the existence of Hulk, Bruce recovered very quickly, and he recovered completely soon. After the wound on his body fully recovered, Bruce said goodbye to Uchiha Madara and wanted to leave this prosperous country. Then do you have any ideas for the future? Where are you planning to go? Uchiha Madara asked curiously. After all, the Hulk in Bruce still exists, so it is very likely that the Hulk will appear again. Uchiha Madara is also afraid that in the case of losing his mind, the Hulk will do things that he regrets. After hearing Uchiha Madara's question, a slightly shy smile appeared on Bruce's face. I'm going to an uninhabited, 530, island. Betty and I have always wanted to live like that before. Bruce smiled, suddenly revealing a bit of sadness. Seeing Bruce like this, Uchiha Madara also felt a little helpless in his heart, but he didn't know how to persuade Bruce. After all, things didn't happen to me. I always stand and talk without back pain, and some things can't be solved with hard work. Just like the Hulk, this is basically an unsolvable problem, and unless Bruce can fully control the appearance of the Hulk, he will never live a normal life. Therefore, Uchiha Madara just sighed helplessly, and then helped Bruce to solve this matter. After all, it was just an island. Now the small islands are not expensive, and there are several small islands under the name of Uchiha Madara. Picking an island with better scenery and more remote, Uchiha Madara handed over the address to Bruce. This is an island under my name. Usually no one will disturb you, and the things on it are complete. Uchiha Madara said very casually. Advertisement. It seems that what was sent out was just something trivial, but for Bruce, it was like giving help in the snow, and a very moved expression appeared on Bruce's face. This is so precious, I just don't know how to thank you, Bruce said incoherently. It's nothing, you can do your research on it with peace of mind, maybe I still have something to ask you for help in the future. Uchiha Madara replied with a slight smile. Knowing that Uchiha Madara was well-intentioned, Bruce complied, and after sending Bruce away, the days would pass. Fury came over and tentatively asked about Bruce's situation, but Uchiha Madara and Fortoni were not fools, and they diverted the topic in a few words. Fury is also very aware of Uchiha Madara's character, and is completely a one-of-a-kind person. Now that he knew that Uchiha Madara didn't want to bring up this topic, Fury stopped asking about these things when he got there. After solving Bruce's matter, Uchiha Madara turned his attention to Tony. After all, Uchiha Madara had already discovered what was wrong with Tony. Before, it was because something else involved Uchiha Madara's attention. Now that everything has been resolved, Uchiha Madara can no longer pretend to ignore it. Tell me, what's the situation? Uchiha Madara raised his chin towards Tony and said casually, but his eyes showed seriousness. Hearing this question, Tony's face first showed a confused expression, and then there was a strange look at Uchiha Madara. What are you talking about? I don't understand, what's the situation? Tony's tone was full of confusion, and he didn't understand what Uchiha Madara was talking about. You were very wrong this time, what happened? What can't you say? Uchiha Madara asked helplessly. Probably didn't think that something was wrong with him, but Uchiha Madara noticed it. Tony froze first, and then started to pretend to be crazy. What are you talking about? There's something wrong with me, I think I'm very good, I've never been better. Tony gave a contrived laugh, and then replied. But it can be seen from Tony's erratic eyes that these words are completely insincere. Because he knew Tony's character, Uchiha Madara didn't want to force Tony, but he sighed helplessly. Advertisement, Tony, you know, I'm very worried that you have something to say, we can solve Zero together. Uchiha Madara looked Tony in the eyes and said very sincerely. Since losing his parents, Tony has been accustomed to solve everything by himself, so his concern for others has always been very awkward. But in the final analysis, Tony's heart still yearns for this concern. Therefore, when Uchiha Madara slowed down and told Tony about this matter, Tony couldn't take it anymore, and turned his head away a little awkwardly. I always thought we were friends, we could trust each other, but it seems you don't think so. Seeing Tony's expression, Uchiha Madara stepped up and said in a very disappointed tone. With a character like Tony, if you confront him head-on, Tony will only act tougher, but showing weakness like Uchiha Madara makes Tony a little overwhelmed. After a moment of silence, Tony chose to surrender, and glanced at Uchiha Madara with some helplessness. You know I have no such thoughts at all, you are the person I trust most in this world, Tony said very sincerely. Probably didn't expect Tony to say this. Uchiha Madara was also taken aback, but he quickly recovered and showed Tony a very bright smile. Now that he has chosen to confess, Tony will naturally stop holding it, and will soon tell the situation he is facing now. Actually, it's not a big deal, it's just that you have to pay a price for gaining power that doesn't belong to you, Tony said calmly. These words were strange, and Uchiha Madara didn't understand until Tony rolled up his sleeves, exposing his arms. After seeing the situation on Tony's arm, even the well-informed Uchiha Madara couldn't help but take a deep breath. The arm that was originally very normal was basically covered with black, and it looked like a deep poison. Seeing Tony's arm, combined with what Tony said before, there is still something that Uchiha Madara doesn't understand. Is it a side effect? Is there any way to replace the ingredients? Uchiha Madara quickly calmed down after being surprised and began to think about a solution. Chapter 275 Palladium Poisoning Advertisement. Chapter 275 Palladium Poisoning. Obviously Tony is the most aware of his own physical condition. As the first person to discover it, Tony naturally thought about how to face this situation. But there should be no good way. Hearing Uchiha Madara's question, a helpless smile appeared on Tony's face. This is palladium poisoning, but there is no way, the arc reactor can only use this thing. Tony's tone was full of bitterness. It was the first time that Uchiha Madara saw such a lost Tony, and he didn't know what to do for a while. What exactly is the situation? You can tell me clearly, there will always be a way, there is no way out. After Uchiha Madara calmed down, he asked about the specific situation. Naturally, he has already shown his most helpless side, so Tony no longer hides it and tells everything. According to Tony, this is basically no solution. When he was kidnapped, Tony made a very rudimentary battlesuit in the cave for O5 to escape, and then he was accidentally blown up by a bomb during the fight. But the situation at the time was relatively simple, so Tony had no way to perform surgery to take out the shrapnel from his body. And the shrapnel is near Tony's heart. As Tony moves closer and closer to the heart, once the shrapnel touches the heart, Tony will be completely finished. In order to prevent his own shrapnel from continuing to move toward the heart, Tony could only use autocracy to track the shrapnel, so that the shrapnel would not move. But because the device is embedded in Tony's body, the palladium element contained in the device will gradually penetrate into Tony's body. When the content of palladium is too high, it will cause a palladium poisoning. Although when talking about this matter, Tony's face was very relaxed. But Uchiha Madara could see from Tony's slightly trembling pupils that Tony's heart was also extremely restless. Using the device to track the shrapnel is the only way to cure the symptoms and not the root cause, and it is completely self-defeating. Advertisement. When the concentration of palladium is too high, it will also cause shock. After all, the blood is not smooth, and the final result is death. So for Tony's approach, Uchiha Madara is very disapproval. You're not completely fighting fire with fire, and in the end it still doesn't work. 35 Uchiha Madara said speechlessly. In fact, Tony also knew this truth. After Uchiha said it so bluntly, Tony's face couldn't hang up, showing an embarrassed expression. If it weren't for Tony being his friend, Uchiha Madara wouldn't care about this matter, and it is estimated that he would still laugh at Tony in his heart. But it was precisely because he regarded Tony as his friend that Uchiha Madara was willing to persuade Tony. You can't go on like this, or take out the device, and the shrapnel still needs to be operated on, Uchiha Madara said very seriously. But Tony showed resistance to Uchiha Madara's proposal. Although Tony knew the consequences of this, he still chose to go his own way. I am very clear about my body, I don't need any surgery at all, and I will not take politics out, Tony said very firmly. Are you crazy? I think you are not very clear-headed now, and there is only one way to go, Uchiha Madara shouted angrily. Seeing that Uchiha Madara seemed to be a little angry, Tony pursed his lips a little helplessly, but he still did not choose to give in. I'm the omnipotent Iron Man, I can't get off this device at all. After a long silence, Tony threw out such a dry sentence. Didn't expect to leave, but out of this idea, Uchiha Madara sighed helplessly. For Tony, the identity of Iron Man does not know whether there are more advantages or disadvantages. But from this point of view, Uchiha Madara is more willing that Tony is just an ordinary person, at least he doesn't need to bear so many responsibilities. But you have to remember that before you became Iron Man, you were Tony Stark, a normal person. Uchiha Madara glanced at Tony and said weakly. But at this time, it seems that it has no effect on Tony, probably since he was kidnapped. Tony may really suffer from post-traumatic sequelae. He is very distrustful of everything around him, and Tony has no sense of security at all. After putting on the iron suit and becoming Iron Man, Tony can seek short-term peace of mind. Advertisement faced with Tony, who is now so stubborn and so sensitive, Uchiha Madara knows that any persuasion has failed. It is better to start from another angle than to confront Tony with rebelliousness. There will always be a day when it will be able to convince Tony. Now those toxins are just in Tony's hands, so there's still time to persuade Tony. So in the face of Tony's very caring eyes, Uchiha Madara sighed helplessly, and then quickly changed the subject. Since you don't want to undergo surgery, then you should try to control the spread of palladium. If you have no life, you can still be Iron Man, Uchiha Madara said to Tony. Probably did not expect Uchiha Madara to compromise so quickly. Tony looked at Uchiha Madara with some confusion. It was Uchiha Madara who coughed lightly to wake Tony up. 530 However, Tony doesn't have any particularly good solutions now. According to Tony's description, there were only some minor abnormalities in the body before. But presumably the concentration of palladium in the blood is not particularly high, so there is nothing wrong with it. It was only during this period of time that he noticed such obvious changes in his body. Since you can create such a device, you can naturally develop a way to reduce the concentration of palladium. Uchiha Madara patted Tony on the shoulder and said in a trusting tone. If there is a way to survive, no one is willing to die in vain. Tony is just unwilling to take out the device in his body, but he is always willing to seek other solutions. I'm doing research now, but there's nothing particularly good about it. In the face of Uchiha Madara's persuasion, Tony's attitude has finally softened a lot, but now there is really no particularly good way. To be honest, it involves a lot of biological and pharmacological knowledge, which Uchiha Madara is not very good at. But when he thinks of these aspects, Uchiha Madara's mind immediately comes to a very suitable candidate. I don't know much about these things, but Bruce is a PhD in biology, so he should know better, Uchiha Madara recommended to Tony. Chapter 276 Subpoena Advertisement Chapter 276 Subpoena. Hearing Uchiha Madara's suggestion, Tony's face also showed a thoughtful expression. Although they don't spend much time together, Tony and Bruce are both geniuses. Although the temperaments of the two are not the same, they are very compatible with each other. After all, as long as he is not provoked and turned into Hulk, Bruce is still very gentle and easy to talk, so Tony and Bruce get along quite happily. Therefore, after hearing the idea of Uchiha Madara, Tony thought about it seriously, and found that Bruce is indeed a trustworthy person. With a character like Tony, as long as Uchiha is not as tough as asking Tony to take out the device in his body, Tony will seriously consider other suggestions. Uchiha Madara also understood Tony's character and characteristics, so he said that he should take out the device at the beginning, which is to retreat. Sure enough, after a moment of contemplation, Tony nodded, agreeing with Uchiha Madara's idea. You can try it, if he is willing to help. Tony should be a little embarrassed, and said a little awkwardly. But Uchiha Madara doesn't really mind Tony's attitude. As long as Tony is willing to try it, it's a good thing. With a character like Tony, he was naturally embarrassed to ask Bruce for help, and Uchiha Madara didn't force it, but turned around to help contact Bruce. After getting away from the hustle and bustle of the city, on the quiet and peaceful island, Bruce is very comfortable, and Uchiha Madara can hear the joy of Bruce from the sound. And on the island, Bruce did not give up his research, very much hoped to solve the Hulk. But after hearing Uchiha Madara's distress, Bruce agreed without saying a word. Anyway, my own business is also a protracted battle, and I don't have any clues. It's better to help Tony first. Bruce's tone was very relaxed. It can be heard that Bruce's tone is very sincere, without any reluctance. Since Bruce is willing to help, that's the best thing. Uchiha Madara quickly told Tony the news, and he still trusted Bruce. Tony. Advertisement. After getting an affirmative answer from Bruce, Tony also passed on the information he had at hand. It would have been best for two people to study together, but Bruce would not leave the island easily. Uchiha Madara also didn't want to embarrass Bruce, so the two of them could only study separately, and then hold a video conference from time to time. Probably because there is someone who can share the things that he has been hiding all the time, so Tony's temper has improved a lot, and finally he no longer loses his temper as often as before. Moreover, Tony was completely self-sacrificing before, and now he has a goal, and the whole person's spirit is much better. Because Tony's identity is too special, no one can say such a thing. Both Uchiha Madara and Tony are very busy with this matter. Therefore, in the eyes of others in the outside world, Tony is still the omnipotent and arrogant Tony, and no one knows how much Tony has endured. However, Uchiha saw that Tony seemed to be enjoying these pressures, so he didn't say anything more, and the days were still peaceful. Tony is sought after by countless people because of his identity as Iron Man, and he has to participate in some activities from time to time. Uchiha Madara has no interest in these events, so basically they will not attend together. Originally there was no problem, but it was just a normal attendance at the event. But when Tony gave a speech for his alma mater, he said something that shocked everyone. In his speech, Tony's words were too bold, indicating that the government of this country is very incompetent. The reason why I let myself go is because no one dares to challenge myself, and I also need to use my own strength to assess the unstable factors outside. At that time, Fury came to drink with Uchiha Madara and watched this speech together with Uchiha Madara. Fury's face was as black as the bottom of the pot. Oh, he hasn't changed at all, and sooner or later he will pay for his arrogance, Fury said meaningfully. Although Uchiha Madara agrees with Fury's statement, it doesn't show it at all. Advertisement. Uchiha Madara just responded indifferently. No one's life is a smooth road, and there will always be some bumps. 35. Seeing Uchiha Madara's attitude, Fury knew that Uchiha Madara didn't want to talk about this topic, so although he was a little angry, he didn't say much. But Tony went out not only to speak for his alma mater, but more importantly to announce that the Stark Group Expo was officially held and lasted for 1 year. From the broadcast screen, you can see Tony's high-spirited look. It didn't take long for Tony to drive back in a sports car, but the expression on his face was not very good. Backquote. What happened? Aren't you quite happy? Uchiha Madara asked curiously. Hearing Uchiha Madara's question, Tony sneered, and then handed a piece of paper in his hand to Uchiha Madara. Seeing Tony's performance like this, Uchiha Madara looked at the thing in his hand curiously, and found that it was actually a summons. This is a ticket issued to Tony by the Senate Armed Services Division headquartered in Hwasong, allowing Tony to go to the meeting 3 days later. In fact, attending a meeting is no different from going to court. In the end, those people didn't give up and wanted Tony to hand over his steel suit. No wonder Tony's face was so bad. But Li Hao, the subpoena has been passed, unless Tony really wants to tear his face, or no matter how reluctant he is in his heart, Tony will still attend the meeting. It's just extremely shameless. It's ridiculous to have to find a high-sounding reason for yourself when you're doing robbery. Tony couldn't help but curse in a low voice. Uchiha Madara also knew that Tony was in a very bad mood now, so he didn't mean to persuade, but let Tony vent on the side. After Tony's mood gradually calmed down, Uchiha Madara talked about the next thing. Since the Senate Armed Services Department has issued such a notice, it means that they must be well prepared. Of course, Tony couldn't just let it go, he still had to think about a way out for himself. They still want the technology of steel suits after all. I think you still want a way out, Uchiha Madara said very seriously. Chapter 277 Hearing Advertisement. Chapter 277 Hearing. In fact, Tony naturally knew this truth, but he really didn't know how to deal with it. They must have already thought of an excuse, these scumbags. Tony's tone was filled with obvious anger. Uchiha Madara also felt that the actions of this group of people were indeed shameful, but rather than cursing, it was more important to find a reasonable excuse to avoid their demands. What other excuses can be given, but it can only be said that your battle uniform is a very harmful weapon. Obviously, a person should not have such a lethal weapon in his hands. Once Uchiha Madara was also in a high position, he was naturally clear about the psychology of the superior. Obviously, Tony naturally agreed with Uchiha Madara's statement, and couldn't help showing a touch of disdain in the corner of his eyes. After discussing for a while, there was no reason to discuss it. After all, this matter still has to be dealt with, so Uchiha Madara quickly ended the topic. Forget it, let's see what shameless words they will say, Uchiha Madara said impatiently. Will you come with me in 3 days? It seemed to be asked casually, but Tony's eyes were full of anticipation. After all, this is still a relatively important matter, so after 530 thought for a few seconds, Uchiha Madara responded. Of course I want to go with you, otherwise in case you do something irrational, Uchiha Madara said with a matter of course. Hearing this, the expression on Tony's face immediately relaxed a lot. Although it has long been known that there must be malicious intentions on the Senate side, Uchiha Madara and Tony are still calm and do not particularly take this matter to heart. 3 days passed in a blink of an eye, and soon it was time to appear in court. Although Tony's performance is still positive, but from Tony's unprepared hand movements, Uchiha Madara found that Tony still has some hesitations in his heart. Advertisement. It's no big deal to relax, I'm still here. Uchiha Madara reached out and patted Tony on the shoulder, comforting Tony. After seeing Uchiha Madara, Tony's pale face finally improved a lot, and he showed a smile. Then, under Tony's doubtful gaze, Uchiha Madara handed a very small mini in-ear earphone to Tony. What is this for? Probably, AFBB, was a little absent-minded, so Tony didn't react for a while and asked curiously. Because he understood Tony's current mood, Uchiha Madara didn't laugh at Tony, but explained it very patiently. I will pay attention to their words, you have to stay calm, this is not the time to be selfish, Uchiha Madara said very seriously. Although the usual Tony does have some waywardness, but fortunately, Tony also understands very well that this matter is very serious now, and it is not the time when he can make trouble unreasonably. Therefore, after hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Tony obediently took the earphones in Uchiha Madara's hands and brought them to his ears. To be honest, it is usually very rare to see Tony so well behaved, and Uchiha Madara felt a little surprised for a while. But now is not the time to think about this mess, after all, the hearing is about to appear. After Uchiha Madara continued to briefly explain a few words to Tony, he found a relatively hidden seat and sat down. After all, such a major hearing will be attended by a lot of media, and Uchiha Madara does not want to expose his identity. Tony's performance in front of Uchiha Madara was called a well-behaved, but when it came to the hearing, Tony's true colors were revealed. When the hearing was about to start, Tony ignored the people sitting on it at all, but turned to look in the direction of Uchiha Madara and winked at Uchiha Madara. Because Tony's move was too obvious, many cameras have turned around and pointed in the direction of Uchiha Madara. After realizing this, Uchiha Madara gave Tony a stern look. At this time, the person sitting in the main seat also took out his small hammer and tapped on the table, and then said to Tony, "Mr. Stark, please turn around first." Advertisement. At this time, Tony showed a casual smile on his face, and finally turned around and aimed his face at the protagonists of the hearing. "Okay, if you have anything, just say it directly. I don't think it has any effect if I turn around. It's using my ears and mouth," Tony said frivolously. These remarks are really disrespectful. After Tony's words fell, there were bursts of laughter in the hearing. The man with the small hammer was already looking very bad, and he tapped the small hammer very hard on the table. "Everyone is quiet, this is a very serious occasion," the gentleman raised his voice and said very seriously. After all, not everyone has Tony's guts. After this person's voice fell, the hearing finally quieted down, and soon these people got to the point. "Mr. Stark, do you have a very clear understanding of what you are doing?" the man sitting in the middle asked very seriously. "What did I do? Tell me what I did." "I did too many things," Tony said casually. Probably didn't expect Tony to be so disrespectful. This person's face suddenly became not good looking, but he still managed to maintain his demeanor. "Please cooperate with our work. According to the information we have obtained, you have a very powerful weapon in your hand," the man in the middle said in a very serious tone. In fact, this is something that everyone knows well, but these people have to find a reasonable excuse for themselves, and they are still guilty in the end. "An extremely lethal weapon. I don't have such a thing in my hand. I don't understand what you mean." Tony shook his head and said very uncooperatively. He had probably already seen Tony's attitude, so this person wasn't angry this time for Tony's disobedience. He took a deep breath, and then a wicked smile appeared on his face. "I don't think this can be denied in a few words. Everyone has seen the steel suit in your hand," the man said aggressively. These were all trivial things before, so Tony could handle it himself, and Uchiha Madara just sat behind and watched without interjecting. After having Uchiha Madara's face, Tony is still rational and can face these doubts calmly. Chapter 278 Advertisement. Chapter 278 And although there is no special preparation, but Uchiha Madara guessed it before, these people will definitely make a fuss about this matter. In fact, Tony didn't do anything particularly excessive. At most, these people said that the steel suit in Tony's hands was a weapon. Moreover, the function of the battlesuit will be played in a very serious direction. Perhaps in the mouths of these people, the steel battlesuit is estimated to be on the same level as nuclear weapons. So Tony was not surprised by this person's excuses. He sat in his seat calmly, and even a hypocritical smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Sir, I think your statement is not correct. I don't think my battlesuit is the weapon you mentioned," Tony said in a very relaxed tone. Although the tone is very relaxed, the expression on Tony's face is not good. After hearing Tony's words, the people sitting above suddenly laughed, and their eyes were full of ridicule. "I don't think there is any need for you to do this kind of unnecessary struggle. Everyone has seen it," the man in the middle said with disdain. This is not to give Tony face at all, just point to Tony's nose brightly and say that Tony is sophistry. Although Tony has always been very gentle and reasonable in front of Uchiha Madara, it does not mean that Tony is really such a character. Hearing this, Tony's eyes suddenly became cold, and the air pressure around his body also dropped. Obviously he was in a very, very bad mood. "I think anyone with eyes can see who is struggling. If I say he is not a weapon, then it is not a weapon," Tony said with a little anger. Seeing that Tony seemed to be provoked, the expression on Uchiha Madara's face also changed, and he hurriedly spoke to persuade Tony. "Tony, you need to stay calm now, they just want to piss you off." Uchiha Madara's tone was as calm as ever. After saying this, Uchiha Madara kept an eye on Tony's movements. Finding that Tony took a deep breath, the anger in his eyes gradually subsided, and Uchiha Madara was also relieved. Advertisement. "I think I prefer to call my steel suit a prosthesis rather than a weapon." After adjusting his attitude, Tony said in a very humorous tone. After hearing Tony's answer, there was a sudden burst of laughter in the very quiet venue. The faces of the people sitting at the top also changed. I didn't expect Tony to be so shameless. After taking a deep breath, the man sitting in the middle didn't look very good, and it seemed that he didn't want to talk nonsense with Tony anymore. Ming people don't speak secretly, everyone knows what the situation is. For everyone's safety, you'd better hand over your steel battlesuit. 95. These words were rude, and Tony couldn't help but sneer after hearing it. For whose safety? I don't think I've done anything to endanger the safety of the people, Tony said lazily, leaning back on his chair. It's not up to you, such a dangerous weapon is the best only if it is handed over to the country, the man in the middle pretended to say. Such shameless words, I don't know what these people said, not only Tony, but even Uchiha Madara couldn't help being amused. To the country. I think it is to you, who knows what you will do with my hard work, Tony replied unceremoniously. We have always served everyone, and this was originally handed over to the people, in order to protect the safety of the people. 9. These remarks were so grand that even the others sitting in the venue couldn't help but point their fingers. The person in the middle actually pretended that nothing happened, and knocked on his little hammer to make everyone quiet down. These people are completely making trouble without reason, and Tony also understands that they have no good excuses at all, and can only use these nonsense to evade. Seeing Tony's hands clenched tightly again, Uchiha Madara also knew that Tony was probably angry, and quickly opened his mouth and pointed at Tony. Since that's the case, just follow him and ask him if he will be equipped with steel suits because all the people. Uchiha Madara said in a low voice. Hearing this, Tony's face also showed a malicious smile, and he raised his head and looked directly at the people sitting on it. Advertisement then, under the watchful eyes of these people, Tony repeated the words of Uchiha Madara. 0. For flowers. Those people who were still sitting on the Diayutai station stiffened at a speed visible to the naked eye, and they didn't know how to answer for a while. Tell them, if they can equip everyone with steel suits, then you are willing to donate the technology of steel suits for free, Uchiha Madara said. At this time, Tony gradually came to understand, knowing that to deal with these shameless people, it is to be more pretentious than them. So Tony asked Uchiha Madara's words without any hesitation. This is actually impossible. The reason why these people came out like this is for their own interests in the final analysis. It's just that there are no other excuses. These people put forward the safety of the people, and I don't usually see these people really worrying about the country and the people. So Tony's words under the teaching of Uchiha Madara are completely inserting a knife into the hearts of these people. There were very stiff smiles on the faces of these people, and the one sitting in the middle pretended to cough a few times. Of course we are willing to do this, but the reality you know is not a fairy tale, and we are not allowed to do this. The real person pretended to be a pity. However, Uchiha Madara and Tony did not eat this set, and watched this person's performance with a mocking smile on their faces. Tell him, then let's talk about it when he can. Uchiha Madara sneered and continued to speak in the headset. It's embarrassing you here, it's better to find a way to develop the economy, so that everyone can enjoy the steel armor. There was no doubt that there was a strong sense of sarcasm in these remarks, and everyone couldn't help laughing after hearing it. These people also understand that using this as an excuse, it is estimated that there is no way to embarrass Tony. Instead, they detour themselves into it, so they change their direction. Mr. Stark, we don't want to argue too much about this, let's just talk about it, said the man in the middle in a very contrived tone. I've been discussing matters with you all the time, and this is a debate based on what you said, Tony sneered and said B. Chapter 279 Advertisement Chapter 279 It was already known from the previous debate that Tony would not give himself face at all, so in the face of Tony's ridicule, the man in the middle directly ignored it. Pretending that nothing happened, he continued talking on his own. No matter how you say it is a weapon, we have invited experts to talk about this in detail. The man in the middle pretended that nothing happened. Then they introduced the weapons expert they called. We now have Mr. Justin Hammer, our main weapons contractor. As the man's voice fell, a man in a suit and glasses stood up. Weapons experts are not self-proclaimed, after all, they're their contractors, a businessman. Uchiha Madara said in a very mocking tone. 533. After Tony repeated one of Uchiha Madara's words, there was tacit laughter in the venue. But this Justin Hammer is a bit interesting, not directly talking about the steel battle suit, but starting from Howard. The sense of his own father Tony is very strange, but after losing his father, he obviously admires Howard Tony. So after Justin Hammer talked about Howard, the expression on Tony's face was obviously not very good. Under the persuasion of Uchiha Madara, he managed to maintain his composure. After speaking some unexplained words, Justin Hammer finally put down the microphone in his hand and returned to his position. However, this matter is far from over, and soon these people invited Roddy to snipe Tony. You must know that in Tony's eyes, Roddy is almost the best friend, so after seeing these people invite Roddy out, the expression on Uchiha Madara's face is not very good. If Roddy really betrayed Tony, Uchiha Madara doesn't know what irrational things Tony will do. Seeing Roddy coming in from behind, Tony got up first to meet him, and gave Roddy a wry smile. After sitting down, these people couldn't wait, so Roddy quickly read out his testimony. Advertisement in the person sitting in the middle is indeed a bit excessive, and even has designated paragraphs, just need Roddy to repeat the prepared materials again. Fortunately, Roddy didn't really want to testify against Tony. Hearing this request, Roddy's first reaction was still refusal. Just reading that paragraph, I don't think I can accurately describe this matter, it will give everyone a wrong impression. Roddy glanced at the person sitting on it and hesitated. But these people obviously couldn't wait, they didn't even want to pretend, and interrupted Roddy mercilessly. It doesn't matter, you just need to read that paragraph. The man in the middle said with a smile, but his tone was irresistible. After all, Roddy is a colonel of the Air Force, so in the face of the current situation, Roddy sighed helplessly. Then he repeated the information he had prepared as required, but after finishing speaking, Roddy chose to speak for Tony. But on the whole, I think that the appearance of Iron Man still has more advantages than disadvantages. Roddy ignored everyone's speech and said to himself. After Roddy said this, the entire venue was almost turned into a vegetable market, and the faces of those sitting on it were obviously not very good. However, these people dared to hold such a hearing, which shows that the preparation is still very sufficient. After Roddy was reluctant to betray his friendship with Tony, these guys came up with something else. We have to trouble Colonel Roddy to explain the prepared video materials for us. The man in the middle said, gritted his teeth. Although he really wanted to speak for Tony, Roddy really couldn't do too much, and he didn't refuse when he heard the words. Soon on the big screen at the front, the video that these people had prepared for a long time was played, but it was just a picture of some militants studying Tony's steel suit. These people use this as an excuse to think that the appearance of the steel battlesuit will destroy the original balance. Uchiha Madara had already made preparations as long as the front screen was playing the video. He took a newly developed mobile phone and kept controlling it, and then Uchiha Madara wrote a piece of code on the spot, and then aimed the screen in front of him. Advertisement After seeing the picture on the screen being transformed, a smile appeared on Uchiha Madara's face. It seemed that the code was successful. 0. Okay, I have prepared a big gift for them, you can explain it to them. Uchiha Madara said with a malicious smile on his face. Hearing this, Tony also put his eyes on the screen, and found that the picture on the screen had completed the transformation. What's playing now are the pictures inside the military base outside, not just those militants who want to study Tony's steel suit. Even the military is very coveted for battle uniforms, and has been secretly researching it for a long time. What these people have done is so shameless. Tony has long been very angry, and now he has the opportunity to make a good mockery. Soon the picture jumped to Justin Hammer researching the steel suit and making a very rough model. It's just that the action is too clumsy, and it doesn't seem to have any lethality at all. My god, isn't this our Mr. Hammer? What is he doing? Tony raised his voice and shouted in mock surprise. Because of Uchiha Madara's move, the entire conference room is now like a vegetable market, and everyone is discussing the current situation in a low voice. Hammer, who pretended to be very unrestrained, couldn't maintain his demeanor. He rushed to the screen like crazy, and wanted to quickly turn off the screen. The expressions on the faces of the officials sitting at the top 1.1 were also very poor. The man in the middle kept shouting, "Turn off that thing, what are you doing?" But the more panic, the more mistakes the action will make, so Hammer couldn't find the remote control after turning around for a long time, and he could only let the screen continue to play. Tony is still adding fuel to the fire, commenting on Hammer's actions in the picture from time to time. How? It's a big gift, I'm a genius. Uchiha Madara's triumphant words reached Tony's ears through the earphones. Hearing this, Tony's mouth also showed a very bright smile. Because Uchiha Madara was sitting in the back corner, which happened to be close to the door, when Roddy came in, the two happened to see each other. Chapter 280 Relieves Toxins Advertisement Chapter 280 Relieves Toxins. While Uchiha Madara was controlling the screen, Tony sat very calmly in his place and didn't do anything. So Roddy naturally understood that this matter could only be done by Uchiha Madara. However, for this move, Roddy didn't feel angry at all, but turned his head slightly and smiled in the direction of Uchiha Madara. Tony naturally admired Uchiha Madara's behavior very much and felt that he had a bad breath. After playing the picture he wanted to play, Uchiha Madara sat in his seat with a calm expression, watching the farce. Because the screen could not be turned off no matter what, Hammer turned off the main switch angrily in the end, finally ending the picture on the screen. But even if the screen can be turned off, these pictures have already been played, and Hammer has no ability to erase everyone's memory. I want to explain that the experimenter managed to survive in the end, Hammer said in a panic when he returned to his position. That's not the point, I think O5 doesn't need you to explain it. Tony glanced at Hammer and said in a very cold tone. I think this farce should also stop. It turns out that I'm like your nuclear threat, Tony said looking at the MPs sitting above. The MPs obviously have something to say, but Tony doesn't want to waste his time anymore. You should thank me instead of thinking about taking away my property all day long. I monopolized world peace by myself. Tony's remarks were loud and clear, and it was obvious that he had some disgust for these insidious tricks. After speaking, Tony stood up directly from his position, turned his head, and looked at everyone behind him with a very bright smile. And these people don't know what kind of thinking, maybe they are really infected. They all stood up from their positions and gave warm applause. In the end, even the congressman sitting in the middle couldn't help but have a smile on his face. This matter was considered to be over, and the congressman announced the end of the meeting. Advertisement. Although Tony was very confident in front of the camera, when he returned to the Malibu villa, Tony couldn't help but whispered about Hammer with Uchiha Madara. He is a loser. He can only take orders that I don't want. I really don't know where he has the courage to accuse me. Tony's tone was full of disdain. Isn't that obvious? He's a certified weapons expert. Uchiha Madara's words were also full of sarcasm. After a few chats, Uchiha Madara quickly changed the subject. There is no need to continue to waste his good mood for these people. Today's expo was very successful, but unfortunately we didn't catch up. They really picked the right time, Uchiha Madara said with a little regret. It's okay, this expo will last for a whole year, and it turns out that I am the truly unique genius. Tony's tone was also full of excitement. At that time Jarvis also came out and had a few words with Tony. After all, Jarvis is Tony's most proud work, and Jarvis is more like Tony's friend than his superiors and subordinates, so the atmosphere in the room was very harmonious. Just as everyone was laughing, there was a sudden sound of a plate breaking. Uchiha Madara turned his head and found that Benben was washing the dishes in a plate, but accidentally smashed the plate. Tony has long been accustomed to this kind of situation, and glared at Clumsy viciously. I swear that sooner or later I will take out your motherboard and soak it in the wine jar, Tony said with a cold face. But Uchiha Madara had already seen that Tony's mouth was hard-hearted and soft-hearted, and knew that such a thing would never happen. Just as Uchiha Madara and Tony were chatting, Uchiha Madara's cell phone suddenly rang, and when he picked it up, he saw that it was Bruce calling. Under normal circumstances, Bruce does not take the initiative to contact Uchiha Madara, and now there must be progress in research on palladium poisoning. Sure enough, as soon as he answered the phone, Uchiha Madara heard Bruce's slightly excited voice coming from the phone. I have made a very important discovery. Although it cannot be completely cured, it should be alleviated. Bruce's voice was full of excitement. Advertisement. This is also a rare good news. After hearing Bruce's words, a smile appeared on Uchiha Madara's face. He couldn't speak a few words, so Uchiha Madara directly opened the video call and let Bruce and Tony have a good chat. After all, that's not something Uchiha Madara is good at. According to Bruce's description, he has already gone through a lot of animal experiments to come to such a conclusion. Chlorophyll can relieve the symptoms of poisoning. Although it cannot be completely cured, it can slow down the spread of toxins. For the current Tony, this is also rare good news, so there is a smile on Tony's face. However, after all, this is only through animal experiments, so no one knows how the real effect will be. It was Uchiha Madara who first calmed down and said that it was better for Tony to try it first. As far as Tony is concerned now, it's just that a person walking in the desert has encountered a 533 oasis, so there's no need to worry about whether it's a mirage or not. So Tony didn't care whether this plan was feasible on the human body, so he was ready to separate chlorophyll. It was rare to see Tony so excited, and Uchiha Madara didn't bother to stop him. He had to take it out for a walk to find out whether it was a mule or a horse. After preparing a large glass of chlorophyll, Tony took a deep breath, and then drank the large glass of chlorophyll directly under the encouraging gaze of Uchiha Madara. After drinking the chlorophyll, Tony directly took out the blood concentration test board he made, pierced his index finger and pressed his index finger on it. How is Jarvis? Is the blood concentration different from what was recorded before? Before Tony could speak, Uchiha Madara asked impatiently. The blood concentration is now 19%, which is a little more than a percentage point lower than before. Jarvis's voice was as calm as ever. But for everyone, this is simply the sound of nature, and a bright smile appeared on everyone's face. However, this is only a preliminary study, and the follow-up will continue to be carried out. After all, the concentration of chlorophyll also needs to be matched. After the preliminary results, Bruce was also very excited, and the whole person was full of motivation.